My mom took my car and said, "You don't need it, so I gave it to your brother." I was really angry until the dealership called and told me that's not how ownership works. When my mom understood what she had done, she freaked out. I was at work when I got a text from my mom. "I gave your car to your brother. You don't need it, he does." I thought it was a bad joke, but she was serious. She had given away my car, the one I paid for with my own money. I left work early, feeling angry and scared. By the time I got to my parents' house, my hands were shaking. My car was gone. I stormed inside and asked, "Where's my car?" trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Your brother needed it more than you. You work close to home. He doesn't. So I gave it to him." I was furious. "You gave it to him? That was my car. I paid for it." She finally looked at me and just rolled her eyes. "We're family. What's yours is his. You'll be fine without it." My anger was boiling. "You've had no right to do that." "None." She shrugged and said, "Actually, I did. The car is in my name." My stomach dropped. She was right. A year ago, my credit was bad, so I asked her to co-sign the loan. But I paid for everything, the down payment and all the monthly payments. I trusted her. "So, you just gave him the keys?" I asked, voice shaking. She smirked. "I signed the title over to him this morning. Problem solved." I couldn't believe it. "Mom, that was my money. You had no right." She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Stop being selfish. He needs it more than you." "It's done." Then my phone rang. It was the dealership. The guy said, "Hey, I got a request to transfer your car's title, but something's off. The car isn't paid off yet, right?" I froze. "Yeah, there's still a balance on the loan." "Exactly. The contract says the car can't be transferred until it's paid in full. So whoever signed the title over had no legal right to do that." For the first time that day, I smiled. "Oh, that's good to know." He chuckled. "And since you're the one making the payments, you actually have the legal right to the car. I can flag the transfer as fraudulent if you want." "Yes, do that," I said, my hands shaking from excitement. "Consider it done," he replied. I walked back into the house, my heart still racing. "We have a problem," I told my mom. She sighed loudly. "What now?" "The dealership called. You can't transfer the title. The car's not paid off, and I'm the one making the payments. The transfer isn't valid." For the first time, she looked worried. "But I signed the papers this morning. It's done." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "The dealership flagged it as fraudulent. Unless you plan to pay off the rest of the loan, the car is still legally mine." Her face twisted with frustration. "But that means—" I cut her off. "It means my brother is driving a car he has no right to, and I could report it stolen if I wanted to." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't." I stared her down. "Try me." She went from shocked to furious. "How could you do this to your own family? Your brother needs that car. You're being selfish." I laughed because it was so ridiculous. "Selfish? You stole from me. You didn't even ask. You just decided my car wasn't mine anymore." "He needed it more," she yelled, standing up. "Then he can buy his own car." I snapped. My mom was about to argue with me when my dad walked in. He usually stayed out of things unless they affected him, but this time he looked angry. "What's going on?" he asked. Before I could explain, my mom jumped in. "Your child is threatening to report their brother to the police because they won't share a car." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad frowned. "Wait, report him for what?" I folded my arms. "For stealing my car. Mom gave it to him without asking, but the dealership says the title transfer isn't valid. The car is still legally mine." My dad looked at my mom. "Tell me that's not true." She raised her chin. "It doesn't matter. He doesn't need the car as much as his brother does." My dad rubbed his forehead like he was getting a headache. "Do you even hear yourself? That's not how this works." My mom crossed her arms and huffed. "He's being dramatic." That's when I knew she wasn't going to back down. I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" she snapped. I ignored her, scrolled to my brother's number, and called him. It rang a few times before he picked up. "Yo," he answered like nothing was wrong. "Where's my car?" I asked, my voice cold. There was a pause. "Dude, relax. Mom said." "I don't care what Mom said." I cut him off. "The dealership flagged the title transfer. It's not valid. The car still legally belongs to me." Silence. Then he said so. I couldn't believe it. So you have two options. Bring it back right now, or I report it stolen. He laughed. Bro, chill. It's just a car. You can get another one. I gripped the phone tighter. I paid for that car. That's my money, my payments. If you don't bring it back in the next hour, I'll call the cops. He sounded nervous now. You're not serious. You have 1 hour, I said, and then I hung up. My mom exploded. How could you do that to your own brother? I snapped back. How could you do this to your own son? You stole from me, and now you're mad that I'm taking it back. She tried to argue, but my dad cut her off. Enough. She looked at him shocked. You're taking his side? My dad looked exhausted. I'm taking the side of the law. He paid for that car. You had no right. My mom looked hurt and angry. Then she said, well, if he gets it back, he's not welcome here anymore. The room went quiet. My dad's eyes turned cold. You're really going to kick him out over this? She lifted her chin. If he calls the police on his own brother, then yes. I swallowed hard, knowing this moment was coming. I took a deep breath. Fine, I said. If that's how it is, then I'm done. My mom blinked. What? I looked at my dad. I'll come by this weekend to grab the rest of my stuff. Then I looked straight at my mom. And don't worry, I won't call the cops. She looked relieved for a second. Then I said, because I'm going to the dealership first thing tomorrow and having the car repossessed. Her face went pale. Wait, no. I cut her off. You made this mess. You wanted to pretend I don't own the car. Fine. Let's see how my brother likes it when a tow truck shows up at his job and takes it back. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving my mom standing there in shock. This was far from over. I barely slept that night. I couldn't stop thinking about my brother driving around in my car, acting like it was his, and my mom feeling like she'd won. But the real reason I couldn't sleep was because I was about to turn the tables in a way they wouldn't see coming. The next morning, I went to the dealership as soon as it opened. The manager, Frank, was waiting for me. You're absolutely in the right here, he said, shaking my hand. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. So what happens now? I asked. We're sending out the repo truck today, Frank said with a grin. But then he looked serious. There's something else. I found something strange while looking into your payments. What do you mean? I asked, frowning. Frank slid a paper across the desk. I looked at it, and my stomach dropped. It showed a second loan under my name, a $28,000 car loan taken out 2 months ago. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice shaking. Frank lowered his voice. It looks like someone used your information to buy another car. It's not the one you bought. It's a different model. Whose car is it? I asked, already dreading the answer. Your mom's, he said grimly. The room spun. My own mother had used my name to get a car for herself, and the payments were already late. So you're telling me my credit is getting ruined because of a loan I didn't even know existed? I asked, trying to stay calm. Frank nodded. I'm afraid so. At that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about my car anymore. This was about getting justice. I left the dealership with a plan. First, get my car back. Then, expose what my mom had done. I went to the bank and pulled my credit report. There it was, a $28,000 loan I never signed for. I called the finance company and reported it as fraud. The lady on the phone sounded worried. Are you saying you didn't approve this? She asked. No, I said. And I want to file a fraud report. After answering some security questions, she spoke carefully. Sir, the cosigner on this loan is the same person who tried to transfer your car's title yesterday. My mom had used my name to buy a car for herself and had my brother cosign it. This was full-blown identity theft. By noon, I got a text from Frank. Repo successful. We got your car back. I felt relief wash over me. Step 1. Complete. Then my phone buzzed again. It was my brother. WTF. Dude? Where's my car? I ignored him. Then my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I got a text from her. How dare you do this to family? I couldn't help but laugh. I let her panic for a while before finally answering her call. How could you do this? She shouted. You mean, how could I take back the car I paid for? Easily. You had no right, I said coldly. Her voice was shaking. "You can't do this. I needed help. You were supposed to help me." I almost laughed. "Help you? You didn't even ask me. You just stole from me." "It's not like that," she said quickly. "I was going to tell you. I just needed the car." "You ruined my credit, Mom. And I already reported the fraud. The finance company will be contacting you soon." "You wouldn't?" she gasped. "I already did. I let that sink in. And you might want to figure out how you're going to get around because they're probably going to repossess your car next." She screamed, and I hung up. By the end of the week, both cars were legally repossessed. My brother had to take the bus. My mom kept calling and texting, begging me to fix things. But I didn't care. She stole from me, lied to me, and destroyed my credit. With the dealership's help, I filed fraud charges. The finance company backed me up. My mom was now under investigation. And when my dad found out what she did, he left her. She had to move in with a distant relative because she couldn't afford rent anymore. As for my brother, he was still mad at me. But I didn't care. They made their choices, and I made mine. Final lesson: don't steal from someone who knows how to fight back. After I hung up on my mom, I took a deep breath and let everything sink in. I had done it. I got my car back. The dealership reported her fraud, and soon her car, the one she used my name to get, was about to be taken away. But I wasn't done. I knew my mom would do anything to get out of the mess she made, and I wasn't going to let that happen. The next day, I met with a lawyer. He was a serious guy who seemed to enjoy taking down scammers. After I told him everything, how my mom took out a loan in my name, tried to steal my car, and ruined my credit, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. "Your mom's in deep trouble," he said. "This is identity theft, fraud, and technically grand theft auto." "So what can we do?" I asked. He grinned. "Oh, we can do a lot." Within 2 days, he filed official fraud claims with the finance company, the credit bureau, and the police. By the end of the week, my mom got served with legal papers. And the best part? Her car got towed right in front of her. I didn't see it myself, but my dad, who was completely done with her at this point, sent me a text. "Repo guy just took the car. She's screaming like a maniac." I couldn't help but laugh. Then came the real meltdown. My mom started calling me over and over, leaving voicemails that went from begging to angry to desperate. First message: "Sweetheart, please, I made a mistake, but we're family. Let's fix this together." Second message: "You selfish little brat. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." Third message: "If you don't drop this, you'll never see a dime of my money when I die." That one made me laugh. She was broke now. By the fifth voicemail, she was crying. "This is going to ruin my life. Please just talk to me." I didn't answer. She stole from me, lied to me, and destroyed my credit. I was done with her. The aftermath. Once the fraud claim went through, the finance company erased the fake loan from my credit, and my score bounced back quickly. But my mom, she was screwed. Because the car was under my name, the finance company made her pay the full amount. And when she couldn't, they took legal action. Last I heard, she had to declare bankruptcy. As for my brother, he tried to guilt me one last time. "Mom's really struggling because of what you did," he texted. I replied, "She did it to herself." Then I blocked him. The end. I got my car back, my credit was fixed, and my mom, who thought she could take whatever she wanted, ended up losing everything. She tried to destroy my life, but instead she destroyed her own, and I didn't feel bad at all. Lesson learned: if you mess with me, be ready to face the consequences.
I need your space, Mom. It's time you figured out your next steps. Elsewhere. Juno's words hit me like a freight train. Standing in the doorway of my own home, I was confronted with a reality I had never anticipated. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, demanding I leave my home for her convenience. "Juno, this is my home," I managed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's just, with the baby coming, I need more space, and you have your studio, right? Can't you just find somewhere else for a bit?" Juno's tone softened, but her eyes were unyielding, a mirror of her father's stubbornness. Graham, leaning against the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee in hand, finally spoke up. "Eloise, maybe it's not such a bad idea. A change of scenery could do you good. We need to think about what's best for Juno right now." I looked between them, my family, sensing the divide that had grown over the years. It wasn't just about space. It was a culmination of years of bending backwards for them, of making sacrifices. My transition to freelance work wasn't just a career choice. It was a necessity to keep our lives afloat while Graham struggled with his career and to provide for Juno's ambitions. Best for Juno? My voice cracked, the weight of my sacrifices pressing down on me. And what about what's best for me? Does that not matter anymore? Eloise, we're just asking for a little compromise. For family? Graham added, his voice attempting warmth but edged with an expectation of compliance. A little compromise? I laughed, a hollow sound. That seems to be all I've ever done. Compromise my time, my career, my dreams, and now my home? Juno's gaze faltered, but her resolve did not. Mom, please. It's not forever, just until I get back on my feet after the baby is born. I stared at them, the reality of my situation sinking in. My family saw me not as a pillar, but as an obstacle, an inconvenience in their lives that could be moved aside when no longer needed. Fine, I said finally, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I'll go, but remember, actions have consequences. I hope you're prepared for them. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The pain of betrayal was too sharp, too raw. My own home, a place where I had poured my heart and soul into making it a sanctuary for us, was now a battleground. Graham and Juno's conversation faded behind me as I ascended the stairs to pack a few belongings. Each step was heavy, laden with the realization that my sacrifices had been for nothing. They had taken everything from me, and now they were taking my home. But as I zipped up my suitcase, a resolve settled over me. I would leave, but this was not the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life, my dignity, and perhaps, in time, my family. But on my terms. I will find my way, I whispered to the empty room. And when I do, I hope they realize the true cost of their demands. With one last glance at the home I had built, I stepped out into the unknown, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. The silence of my new, smaller studio apartment was deafening. Gone were the familiar sounds of my old home, the laughter, the arguments, the life that I had built, brick by brick, only to be pushed out. I sat at my makeshift desk, surrounded by boxes still unpacked, the glow of my computer screen the only light in the room. The stark contrast between my past and present life couldn't be more apparent, and as I sifted through emails, trying to find solace in work, the doorbell rang, a sharp interruption to my solitude. It was Graham, his presence at my doorstep both a surprise and a harbinger of unwelcome news. Eloise, we need to talk, he said, stepping into the dim light of my apartment without waiting for an invitation. What's left to talk about, Graham? I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. It's about the house and finances. Juno's needs are more than we anticipated. We're going to need more help from you. I stared at him, incredulous. More help? After everything you're asking for more? It's for your daughter, Eloise. You wouldn't want her to suffer, would you? His words were manipulative, aiming to guilt-trip me into compliance. Graham, I've given everything, my home, my peace, my life. What more do you want from me? My voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief coloring my tone. Just think about it. It's for Juno, he repeated, his voice cold, the fatherly concern feigned at best. As he left, his words lingered in the air, a toxic reminder of the betrayal that had become my reality. They expected more from me, always more, never considering the cost to my own well-being. The following day, I decided to visit the house, not to relent to their demands, but to confront the situation head-on. The sight of my former home, now overtaken by Juno's expanding needs, was a stark representation of my displacement. Juno greeted me with a tepid smile, her earlier boldness replaced with a veneer of guilt. Mom, I didn't think it would come to this, but we really need the help. Juno, I've helped enough. It's time you and your father figure things out on your own. I've been pushed out of my home, asked to give up my life for you, and now you ask for more? My voice, though firm, was not without pain. But Mom, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Her entitlement was evident, expecting me to solve problems of her own making. That's something you should have thought about before. I'm your mother, not your fallback plan. Turning to leave, I felt a surge of resolve. No longer would I be the silent supporter, taken for granted and expected to give endlessly. As I walked away, I heard Juno's frustrated voice behind me. You're just going to leave your daughter like this? I didn't look back. You left me long before this, Juno. It's time you learn what life demands. That night, as I lay in the quiet of my new reality, the idea began to form. If they expected me to give more, then I would, but not in the way they anticipated. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to show Graham and Juno the consequences of their actions. My contributions, my sacrifices, would no longer be invisible. They had awakened a determination within me, a drive to seek justice for the wrongs done. And as the plan took shape in my mind, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the true cost of their demands. My revenge would be my return, my reclamation of dignity, and it would start with taking back what was rightfully mine. My resolve had never been clearer as I embarked on my plan of retribution. The first step was uncovering the full extent of Graham's deceit. Over the years, he had masterfully crafted the narrative that he was the financial backbone of our family, a story I knew all too well to be false. But it was time the truth came to light, not just for me, but for Juno too. I began by meticulously gathering financial statements, bank records, and property deeds, evidence of my contributions, my sacrifices. It was during this search that I discovered something more insidious. Documents hidden away in a file I had never seen before revealed a shocking truth. Graham had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private one I knew nothing about. The revelation was a cold, hard slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. Armed with this information, I confronted Graham, demanding answers. "Graham, what is this?" I slammed the documents on the kitchen table in front of him, the numbers and transactions a glaring testament to his betrayal. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "Eloise, it's not what you think. I was saving that money for us, for our future." "Our future?" I scoffed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Or your future without me. You've been lying to me, to Juno, undermining my contributions, making me out to be the lesser partner in our marriage." Graham's attempts to explain were feeble, his words empty. "Eloise, I just thought—" "You thought you'd get away with it," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You thought I'd never find out. But I did, and now everything changes." The confrontation left Graham rattled, his facade of control crumbling. But for me, it was the catalyst for my next move. If Graham could betray me in such a fundamental way, then all bets were off. I took my findings to a lawyer, explaining my situation and my desire to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The lawyer, a woman of sharp wit and even sharper legal acumen, laid out a plan that was both brilliant and ruthless. "We'll begin with the house," she said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "It's in your name alone, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, a sense of empowerment growing within me. "Then you have more power than you realize. We can leverage this to not only secure your financial independence, but also to send a clear message to Graham and Juno." The plan was simple yet effective. I would sell the house, the one asset solely in my name, and reclaim the financial stability Graham had tried to steal from me. But more than that, it would be my declaration of independence, a demonstration that I was no longer the woman they could manipulate and betray without consequence. As I initiated the process, my interactions with Graham and Juno became strained, their demands and manipulations more desperate. Yet, with each attempt to sway me, my resolve only strengthened. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Juno pleaded one day, her voice tinged with panic. "Where will we go? What about the baby?" "You should have thought of that before," I replied, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine." Graham, too, tried to appeal to my sense of family, of loyalty, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now, his true nature revealed in the light of his actions. As the sale of the house moved forward, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had been bound by my roles as a wife and mother, my own needs and desires secondary to those of my family. But no longer. I was taking back control, forging a new path on my own terms. And as for Graham and Juno, they would soon learn the true cost of their ingratitude and betrayal. My revenge was not just about punishment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and my life. The day I left for the last time, the air was thick with an unspoken tension. Graham and Juno stood in the living room of the house that was no longer ours. their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. They had just learned of the sale, a transaction done quietly, without their knowledge. "You sold the house?" Graham's voice was low, disbelief etched into every word. "Our home, Eloise? How could you?" "It's in my name, Graham. My home. And I decided to sell it," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. Juno, her hands cradling her growing belly, looked from Graham to me, her eyes wide. "But where will we go? What about the baby?" "That's something you should have considered before demanding I leave my own home," I replied, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "This is betrayal, Eloise, pure and simple," Graham said, his voice rising in anger. "Betrayal?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to talk about betrayal? Look in the mirror, Graham. You lied, you manipulated, you took everything I gave and asked for more." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I turned to leave, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another, one where I was in control. As I reached the door, Graham's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this, Eloise. You're tearing this family apart." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning back, I said, "No, Graham. This family was torn apart long ago. I'm just the first to acknowledge it." Leaving the house behind, I didn't look back. The finality of the moment was overwhelming, but beneath the sorrow and betrayal, there was a burgeoning sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was free from the expectations and demands that had defined my life. In the weeks that followed, the reality of my actions set in. Graham and Juno were forced to find a new place to live, their comfortable existence upended by my decision. Rumors and whispers followed me in our small community, some sympathetic, others critical. But none of that mattered. I had taken a stand, reclaimed my agency, and in doing so, had started down a path of self-discovery and independence. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place of peace and creativity. Work flourished as I threw myself into projects, my graphic design business thriving as never before. And in the quiet moments, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience forged through years of sacrifice and hardship. The phone calls from Graham and Juno became less frequent, their attempts to guilt me into reversing the sale unsuccessful. Each call was a reminder of the chasm between us, a gap that had widened too much to ever fully bridge. One day, as I sat at my desk, the sun setting outside my window, I realized I no longer felt anger or bitterness toward Graham and Juno. Instead, there was a sense of pity for them, for their inability to see beyond their own needs and desires. I had moved on, building a life that was truly mine, free from the constraints of my old one. The sale of the house, once a source of contention and pain, was now a symbol of my liberation, a decisive step toward a future filled with possibility. And as I looked forward to what lay ahead, I knew that the best revenge wasn't the pain I had inflicted on Graham and Juno, but the life I was building for myself, one where I was no longer a victim of their selfishness and deceit. It was a life where I was finally, truly free. The completion of the house sale marked not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I stood firmly on my own 2 feet, unburdened by the expectations and manipulations of those I had once called family. My new apartment, once a symbol of my forced exile, had become a haven of peace and creativity. The walls, adorned with my own designs, reflected a life that was entirely mine. My freelance work, now more than just a job, was a testament to my resilience, a thriving business built from the ashes of my former life. It was during this time of renewal that I received a call from Graham, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. "Eloise, you've taken everything from us. How could you do this to your own family?" "Family?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "A family supports each other, Graham. What you and Juno did was far from supportive. It was selfish." "You're going to regret this, Eloise. You can't just start over and expect us to disappear. We're your family, whether you like it or not." "I've made my peace with that, Graham. It's time you make yours," I replied, my voice calm but firm. The call ended with a click, his threats hanging in the air, but they no longer had any power over me. The weeks turned into months, and my life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The drama and turmoil that had once defined my existence seemed like distant memories. But I knew that true closure had not yet been achieved. The final act of my plan was still unfolding, a silent countdown to the moment when Graham and Juno would realize the full extent of their actions. That moment came unexpectedly. I had ventured out to a local cafe, a small luxury in my new life of independence, when I spotted them. Graham and Juno were seated at a table near the window, their conversation tense and fraught with emotion. I could overhear snippets of their dialogue, words tinged with regret and desperation. "Can't believe she did this to us," Juno was saying, her voice a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "It's her revenge, Juno. She's made her point," Graham replied, his tone resigned. The sight of them, so defeated and broken, stirred something within me. Not satisfaction or triumph, but a profound sadness for what could have been. We had once been a family, bound by love and shared dreams. Now, all that remained were the shattered pieces of our once happy life. As I left the cafe unnoticed by them, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My revenge, though justified, had come at a great cost. The family I had once cherished was no more, their place in my life now occupied by memories and lessons learned. In the solitude of my apartment, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. From the depths of betrayal and loss, I had emerged stronger, more self-assured. My revenge, while necessary, was not the source of my strength. It was the realization that I alone was the architect of my happiness, the master of my destiny. And so, as I looked towards the future, I knew that the best was yet to come, not because of the revenge I had exacted, but despite it. My life, once defined by others, was now my own, and with each passing day I would build it, piece by piece, into something beautiful and unbreakable. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I faced it head-on, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unyielded. For I had learned that true strength comes not from vengeance, but from the courage to move forward, to forgive, and ultimately, to find peace within oneself. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. A crisp morning breeze accompanied my steps as I approached the house I once called home, the real estate agent beside me. The for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, a beacon of the impending change. Graham and Juno, unaware of my arrival, were about to face the reality of their situation head-on. As I rang the doorbell, my heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The door swung open, and there stood Graham, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief as he saw me. "Eloise, what are you doing here?" he stammered, confusion written all over his face. "I'm here to show the house, Graham. It's time you both faced the consequences of your actions," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil within. Juno appeared behind Graham, her eyes widening in shock. "You can't be serious, Mom. You're really going through with this?" "Yes, Juno, I am. You both seemed to forget that this house was the one thing I had left. You took everything else from me," I said, the words laced with a bitterness I no longer bothered to hide. The real estate agent, a neutral party in the midst of our familial storm, stepped forward. "If you'll allow us, we have potential buyers on the way. It would be best if we could proceed without any complications." Graham and Juno exchanged a look of desperation, the reality of their situation finally dawning on them. "Eloise, please, there has to be another way. We'll be left with nothing," Graham pleaded, his voice breaking. "You left me with nothing when you demanded I leave my own home," I countered, my resolve hardening. "I warned you, actions have consequences. It's time you learned that lesson." As the potential buyers arrived, Graham and Juno retreated into the house, their whispers a cacophony of regret and disbelief. The real estate agent and I led the buyers through the property, each room a reminder of the life I once lived, the memories I once cherished. After the showing, as I stood in the living room for what could be the last time, Juno approached me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never wanted it to come to this." Her apology, though heartfelt, came too late. "Juno, I hope one day you understand why I had to do this. Maybe then you'll forgive me as I'm trying to forgive you." Leaving the house behind, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The sale was more than just a transaction. It was a symbol of my liberation from the chains of betrayal and manipulation. Graham and Juno's future was now in their own hands, just as mine was in mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and finalizations. The house sold quickly, the market eager to claim such a prized property. and with the final signature I closed the chapter on a significant part of my life. As I sat at my apartment, the deed to the house now transferred, I realized the depth of what I had accomplished. I had stood up for myself, faced my betrayers, and emerged victorious. But it was a victory tinged with sadness, for in gaining my independence, I had lost my family. Yet as I looked toward the future, I knew that this was only the beginning. My journey of self-discovery and empowerment was far from over. I had found strength in my solitude, resilience in my resolve, and a sense of peace in my decisions. Graham and Juno's path would be their own to forge, just as mine was now solely in my hands. The road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with a newfound confidence, ready for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The aftermath of the house sale was like a storm that had passed, leaving behind a trail of devastation and a new, uncertain path forward. Graham and Juno, now without a home, were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The comfortable life they had known at my expense was gone. I heard about their struggles through the grapevine, the small town's network buzzing with gossip. They had moved into a small, cramped apartment, a far cry from the spacious comfort of the home I had sold. It was in this setting that I decided to confront them one last time, to see for myself the consequences of my actions. Knocking on their door, I braced myself for the encounter. Juno answered, her appearance a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman she once was. Her eyes, once full of life, now held a weariness that spoke volumes. "Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and resignation. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how you're doing," I replied, stepping into the dimly lit apartment. The space was cramped, cluttered with boxes and makeshift furniture, a far cry from the comfort of our former home. Graham appeared from the other room, his expression hardening at the sight of me. "Come to gloat, Eloise? To see the results of your revenge?" "No, Graham, I came to see if there's anything left of the family we once were," I said, my voice steady. The conversation that followed was tense, filled with accusations and recriminations. Juno and Graham blamed me for their current situation, unable to see their own roles in the downfall of our family. "You took everything from us, Mom. How could you?" Juno's voice cracked with emotion, her earlier bravado gone. "I did what I had to do, Juno. You and Graham made your choices, and I made mine," I replied, the pain of our broken relationship evident in my words. Graham, ever the antagonist, sneered, "You think you've won, Eloise, by selling the house and leaving us like this?" "This wasn't about winning, Graham. It was about respect, about recognizing my contributions and sacrifices, something you never did," I said, my resolve firm. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the chasm between us was too wide to bridge. The pain and betrayal had left deep scars, too deep for easy forgiveness or reconciliation. Leaving their apartment, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the family we could have been, anger at the years of manipulation and disrespect, and surprisingly a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe this ordeal would be a wake-up call for Juno and Graham, a chance for them to reflect on their actions and perhaps find a way to change. The walk back to my apartment was a reflective one. I had sought revenge, and I had achieved it. But at what cost? The satisfaction of seeing Graham and Juno confront the consequences of their actions was overshadowed by the realization that our family was forever altered. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, my work, and my sense of self. The drama and revenge that had consumed me were now in the past, a chapter closed. I had emerged stronger, more independent, but the journey had left its mark. The lesson was a hard one, learned through pain and loss. True strength comes not from vengeance, but from the ability to move forward, to forgive oneself, and to find peace in the aftermath of turmoil. And so, as I continued to build my new life, I held on to that lesson. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a heart open to new beginnings, and a spirit healed from the wounds of the past. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with determination and hope, ready for whatever lay ahead. Years had passed since the house sale, years in which the silence between us had grown into a chasm seemingly insurmountable. I had moved on, my life now filled with new challenges and achievements, my past with Graham and Juno a distant, if painful, memory. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received a letter, its handwriting unfamiliar. The return address bore Juno's name, a name that stirred a myriad of emotions within me. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope, bracing myself for what might be inside. "Dear Mom," the letter began, each word heavy with an emotion that seemed to reach out from the page. "It's taken me years to find the courage to write this. I know I've caused you unimaginable pain, and for that, I am deeply sorry. My actions were unforgivable, driven by selfishness and a failure to see beyond my own needs." I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Juno's words, so raw and honest, were a far cry from the daughter I remembered. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, on the choices I made, and the people I hurt. It's been a difficult journey, one filled with regret and a deep desire for redemption. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know that I am truly sorry for everything." The letter continued, detailing Juno's life since we last spoke. She talked about the challenges of raising her child alone, of the hardships and the lessons learned along the way. It was a story of growth and change, of a young woman who had faced the consequences of her actions and emerged stronger for it. "I'm reaching out not just to apologize, but to ask for a chance to start anew, to rebuild what we once had, in whatever form that might take. I miss you, Mom. I miss our family, despite everything that's happened." Finishing the letter, I found myself at a loss. The emotions that coursed through me were a tangled web of sorrow, anger, and surprisingly, hope. Juno's words had opened old wounds, but they also offered the possibility of healing, of reconciliation. The decision to respond weighed heavily on me. Could I forgive her? Could we ever rebuild what had been so thoroughly destroyed? The answer was unclear, the path forward fraught with uncertainty. Days passed as I pondered Juno's letter, her words echoing in my mind. It was a conversation with an old friend that finally gave me clarity. "Forgiveness isn't just for those who wrong us," she said. "It's for us, too. A way to let go of the past and move forward." And so I wrote back to Juno. My letter was cautious but open, expressing my own pain and the long journey I had taken towards healing. I spoke of the possibility of starting anew, not as the family we once were, but as something different, something new. "Let's take it one step at a time," I wrote. "Building bridges takes effort from both sides, and I'm willing to try if you are." Sending the letter was like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Whether Juno and I could truly reconcile remained to be seen, but the door was open, a crack of light in the long darkness that had separated us. The days turned into weeks, and eventually Juno replied. Her response was filled with gratitude and hope, a mirror of my own cautious optimism. We agreed to meet, to talk face to face after so many years apart. Sitting across from her that day, I saw not the selfish young woman who had demanded so much from me, but a mature, thoughtful individual who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and apologies, but also with laughter and shared memories. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one marked not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of the future. Forgiveness had opened the door to a new relationship, one built on understanding, respect, and love. As I looked at Juno, now not just my daughter, but a fellow survivor of life's trials, I knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the journey we would take together, hand in hand towards a brighter future. The echo of Marina's whispered words sent a chill down my spine. I stood frozen, clutching the laundry basket, as her hushed conversation wafted through the open door of the guest house. Something about the tone and urgency of her voice raised every red flag within me. "I know, but I need more time," she pleaded. Her voice strained. "Just a few more weeks, and I swear I'll have the money." My heart raced as I realized she was talking to a man who was not my son, Adrian. A familiar knot of unease twisted in my gut. Marina's erratic behavior and constant need for cash had become a source of concern, but this conversation hinted at something more sinister. Footsteps approached, and I quickly retreated, my mind whirling with unanswered questions. As Marina emerged, her expression was one of barely contained panic. She jumped when she noticed me, her eyes wide with what looked like guilt. "Delilah, I didn't see you there," she stammered, her hand clutching her phone tightly. "Everything okay, dear?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Yes, of course," she replied with a forced smile. "Just a call about work." "Work? Marina hadn't held a job in years, not since Lila was born. The lie was transparent, and it only deepened my suspicions. Over dinner that evening, Adrian and Hank remained oblivious to the tension simmering between Marina and me. Lila, our sweet 7-year-old granddaughter, chattered away, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents rippling beneath the surface. As the meal progressed, I couldn't help but study Marina's behavior. The way she fidgeted, her eyes darting around the room, the forced smiles that never quite reached her eyes. It was as if she carried a heavy burden, one she was desperate to conceal. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, I found myself pacing the living room, unable to shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Marina's cryptic conversation replayed in my mind, each word amplifying the disquiet that had taken root. Hank emerged from our bedroom, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on, Delilah? You've been on edge all evening." I hesitated, unsure of how to voice my suspicions without sounding paranoid. But Hank's patient gaze encouraged me to open up. "It's Marina," I confessed, wringing my hands. "I overheard her on the phone earlier, and it sounded like she's in some kind of trouble, financial trouble, perhaps. She was pleading with someone for more time, promising to pay them back." Hank's expression grew grave as he absorbed my words. "Are you certain?" I nodded, recounting the details of the conversation I'd overheard. As the words tumbled out, I could see the weight of my concerns settling upon Hank's shoulders. "We need to tread carefully," he said, his voice heavy with caution. "Accusations without proof could do irreparable damage to this family." His words struck a chord, and I knew he was right. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Marina was hiding something that threatened the very fabric of our family's well-being. As I lay awake that night, my mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. One thing was certain: I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. The truth had to be uncovered, even if it meant shattering the fragile peace we had so carefully cultivated. In the days that followed, a palpable tension lingered in our home. I found myself constantly on edge, scrutinizing Marina's every move, searching for any clues that might shed light on her mysterious behavior. The truth was, I distrusted her, a realization that filled me with guilt, but one I couldn't ignore. It started with small things: a missing piece of jewelry, a few dollars gone from my purse. Insignificant incidents, perhaps, but they felt like threads in a larger tapestry of deceit. Marina's excuses rang hollow, her explanations riddled with holes that only deepened my suspicions. "I must have misplaced it," she'd say, waving away my concerns with a casual shrug. But the glint in her eyes betrayed her nonchalance, hinting at something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Then came the larger transgressions, the ones that couldn't be easily dismissed. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint bank account, purchases of expensive clothing and accessories that seemed far beyond her means. Marina's once frugal ways had given way to a newfound taste for luxury, and I couldn't help but wonder where the money was coming from. "It's just a little treat for myself," she'd insist, flashing a dazzling smile that did little to mask the calculating gleam in her eyes. Hank tried to reason with me, urging caution and patience. "We can't make accusations without proof," he'd remind me, his voice laced with concern. But I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong, and Marina was at the center of it all. It was during one of our hushed conversations that a plan began to take shape. A way to catch Marina in the act, to unravel the web of deception she'd so carefully woven. With Hank's reluctant approval, I began marking the bills in our cash box, a silent trap waiting to be sprung. The days ticked by, each one more tense than the last. Marina's behavior grew increasingly erratic, her absences more frequent and her excuses more flimsy. It was as if she knew the walls were closing in, and she was scrambling to maintain her facade of normalcy. Then, one fateful afternoon, I caught her red-handed. I'd returned home unexpectedly, only to find Marina rifling through my dresser drawers. Her eyes went wide with panic when she saw me, and she instinctively tried to hide the bundle of marked bills clutched in her trembling hand. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Marina's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits of defiance. "You have no right to accuse me," she spat, her words laced with venom. You're just a paranoid old woman, grasping at shadows. Her words stung, but I refused to back down. Those are my bills, Marina, the ones I marked specifically to catch you in the act. For a moment, she faltered, her mask of indignation slipping. But then, just as quickly, it snapped back into place, and she unleashed a torrent of denials and accusations, painting me as the villain in her twisted narrative. Hank rushed in, alerted by the commotion, and tried to play peacemaker. But Marina would have none of it, storming out and leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. As I watched her retreating figure, a sense of grim determination settled over me. The game was up. The truth laid bare. Marina's betrayal had been exposed, and now the real battle was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as we all gathered in the living room. Marina sat rigidly on the couch, her arms crossed defensively, while Adrian paced back and forth, his expression etched with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This is absurd," Marina spat, her eyes flashing with defiance. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" I steeled myself, clutching the bundle of marked bills like a lifeline. "These are the same bills I marked, Marina. I found them in your possession, hidden in my dresser drawer." Adrian's head whipped around, his gaze shifting between us like a pendulum. "What's going on?" "Someone needs to explain this to me right now." Hank placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, his silent support bolstering my resolve. "We caught Marina stealing from us, son. She's been taking money, jewelry, anything she could get her hands on." Marina recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her expression contorting into one of outrage. "How dare you? You're both delusional, grasping at straws to suit your twisted little narrative." "We have proof, Marina," I said, my voice firm. "These marked bills are all the evidence we need." "That proves nothing," she snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're just looking for an excuse to turn Adrian against me." Adrian flinched, his face pale with shock. "Marina, please, tell me this isn't true." For a moment Marina faltered, her mask of defiance slipping ever so slightly. But then, just as quickly, she rallied, turning her venomous gaze on her husband. "Of course it's not true, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Your mother has become unhinged in her old age. She's seeing things that aren't there, twisting innocent actions into some grand conspiracy." My heart sank as Adrian's eyes clouded with doubt. Marina had played her trump card, exploiting the unbreakable bond between mother and son. "Mom, I don't know what to believe," Adrian stammered, his eyes pleading with me to retract my accusations. Before I could respond, Marina pounced, her words slicing through the air like daggers. "Your mother has always resented me, Adrian. She's never accepted me into this family, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us." Tears of frustration stung my eyes as I watched Marina's manipulation take hold. She was a master of deception, weaving her lies with surgical precision, playing on Adrian's love and loyalty like a virtuoso. "That's not true," I protested, my voice cracking with emotion. "I'm only trying to protect this family from her deceit." Adrian shook his head, his expression clouded with a mixture of hurt and confusion. I don't know what to believe anymore." Marina seized the opportunity, wrapping her arms around him in a gesture of false comfort. "It's okay, my love. We'll get through this, just like we always do." As I watched them embrace, the bitter taste of defeat filled my mouth. Marina had won this round, her lies and manipulations carrying the day. But deep within me, an ember of determination still burned, fueled by the knowledge that the truth was on my side. This was far from over. In the aftermath of Marina's blatant lies and Adrian's misguided loyalty, a palpable rift had formed within our family. The once warm and inviting atmosphere had given way to a chilling tension, each of us trapped in our own emotional turmoil. Marina strutted around the house with a smug air of victory, her every action a silent taunt, a reminder of the wedge she'd driven between us. Her deceit had taken root, casting doubt and suspicion like a noxious cloud that threatened to consume us all. Hank, bless his heart, tried his best to remain the voice of reason. "We need concrete evidence," he'd say, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination, "something that can't be twisted or denied." His words struck a chord within me, reigniting the flames of my resolve. If Marina wanted a war, then a war she would have. I would not rest until the truth was laid bare, no matter the cost. With Hank's reluctant approval, I took the first step in my quest for vindication, installing hidden cameras throughout the house. It felt like a violation of trust, but Marina's betrayal had left me with little choice. Day after day, I pored over the footage, documenting every suspicious movement, every whispered conversation, every unexplained absence. Each new piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing the bigger picture of Marina's deceit. I became a prisoner in my own home, haunted by the ghosts of Marina's lies. Sleep evaded me, my nights consumed by the flickering images on the monitor, searching for that one damning moment that would unravel her carefully constructed web of deception. Marina, oblivious to my covert surveillance, grew bolder in her actions. Her spending spiraled out of control, designer handbags and expensive jewelry adorning her like trophies of her conquest. And all the while she played the part of the doting wife and mother, her lies growing more elaborate with each passing day. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I found an unlikely ally in my quest for the truth. An old friend from my nursing days, a former police officer named Cynthia, had reached out after sensing my distress. Over cups of strong coffee and whispered confidences, I poured out the sordid details of Marina's betrayal, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Cynthia listened intently, her eyes filled with a combination of sympathy and steely determination. "You need to document everything," she urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "Every lie, every unexplained expense, every suspicious action. Build an airtight case that even Adrian can't ignore." Her words ignited a newfound sense of purpose within me. I would become a one-woman investigation team, leaving no stone unturned in my quest to expose Marina's duplicity. With Cynthia's guidance, I began meticulous documentation, cross-referencing bank statements, receipts, and eyewitness accounts. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the fortress I was building, a bastion of truth that would withstand even Marina's most vicious assaults. As the days turned into weeks, the strain of my double life began to take its toll. Marina's barbed comments and dismissive glances cut deeper with each passing day, reminding me of the precarious position I found myself in. But through it all, Cynthia remained my unwavering rock, a beacon of support in the storm of Marina's lies. Her friendship became a lifeline, sustaining me through the darkest moments when doubt threatened to consume me. Little did Marina know, the walls were closing in. The truth was a relentless hunter, and I was its unyielding pursuer. Her reign of deception was nearing its end, and soon she would face the consequences of her actions. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of our family, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. As the days ticked by, the strain of my covert investigation began to take its toll. Sleep became a fleeting luxury, replaced by endless hours spent hunched over the monitor, scouring the footage for any shred of evidence that could unravel Marina's web of lies. Cynthia became my lifeline, her steadfast support and unwavering belief in my cause the only thing keeping me afloat. Our meetings grew more frequent, our conversations a safe haven where I could voice my fears and frustrations without judgment. "She's unraveling, Cynthia," I confided one evening, my voice laced with exhaustion. "The more evidence I gather, the more reckless she becomes." Cynthia nodded grimly, her eyes reflecting a grim understanding. "Cornered animals are often the most dangerous. Marina knows the walls are closing in, and she's lashing out in desperation." Her words rang true. Marina's behavior had become increasingly erratic, her lies more brazen, and her actions more reckless. It was as if she believed she had already won, that her manipulation of Adrian had granted her immunity from consequence. "She's spending like there's no tomorrow," I lamented, rifling through a stack of bank statements. "Expensive jewelry, designer clothes, lavish outings. It's like she's flaunting her ill-gotten gains right in front of us." Cynthia's brow furrowed as she studied the documentation I had meticulously compiled. "She's overconfident, sloppy. That's good for us. It means she's making mistakes." I nodded, my jaw clenched with determination, "and I'll be there to catch every single one of them." With each passing day, the rift within our family grew wider, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Adrian remained steadfastly loyal to Marina, dismissing my concerns as unfounded paranoia fueled by resentment. "Mom, you need to let this go," he pleaded, his eyes filled with a mixture of exasperation and concern. "Marina loves us, and your constant accusations are tearing this family apart." His words cut deep, but I refused to back down. "I'm only trying to protect us, Adrian. Can't you see what she's doing?" Marina would swoop in during these moments, playing the role of the devoted wife to perfection. "Your mother is blinded by her irrational hatred for me," she cooed, her eyes brimming with false tears. "She's become consumed by this vendetta, and it's poisoning her mind." Adrian would pull her close, casting reproachful glances in my direction as he comforted his wife, the woman I knew to be a master manipulator. These scenes played out with increasing frequency, each one chipping away at my resolve. But Cynthia's unwavering support kept me grounded, her friendship a lifeline in the storm of Marina's deceit. "Don't let her get to you," Cynthia urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "She's playing mind games, trying to break your spirit. But you're stronger than that, Delilah. You have the truth on your side." Her words reignited the flame of determination within me. I would not be deterred, not by Marina's lies or her emotional manipulation. The truth was my shield, and I would wield it like a sword, cutting through the tangled web of deception that had ensnared my family. As the evidence mounted, so too did the weight of the burden I carried. Sleep became elusive, replaced by fitful slumbers haunted by Marina's betrayal. But I refused to falter, driven by a singular purpose, to expose the truth and restore the sanctity of our family. Little did Marina know, her reign of deception was nearing its end. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, a reckoning that would shake the foundations of our lives, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. The air was thick with tension as we gathered around the dining table for our weekly family dinner. Marina, ever the master of deception, wore a mask of serene domesticity, busying herself with serving platters and making small talk as if nothing were amiss. Adrian, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, chatted amiably about his work, his eyes filled with a love and devotion that made my heart ache. How could he not see the monster he had welcomed into our home, into our lives? Hank shot me a sidelong glance, his expression a silent plea for restraint. But the time for patience had passed. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered was irrefutable, and I could no longer stand idly by as Marina's lies poisoned our family. As Marina placed the final dish on the table, I cleared my throat, the sound cutting through the forced conviviality like a knife. "Before we begin, there's something we need to address." Marina's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "What is it, Delilah?" I leveled my gaze at her, steeling myself for the battle to come. "I know what you've been doing, Marina. The stealing, the lies, the secret meetings. I have proof of all of it." A hush fell over the table as Adrian and Hank exchanged bewildered glances. Marina, for her part, maintained her facade of innocence, a sickly sweet smile curling her lips. "I don't know what you're talking about," she demurred, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "These accusations are baseless and hurtful." "Enough with the lies," I snapped, my patience finally fraying. "I have footage of you rifling through our belongings, taking money and valuables. I have documentation of your secret rendezvous and unexplained expenditures." Marina's mask slipped, her expression contorting into one of barely contained fury. "You've been spying on me? In my own home?" "Our home," corrected, my voice firm. "The home you've been systematically robbing and betraying with your deceit." Adrian's eyes widened, his gaze flickering between us as the reality of the situation began to sink in. "Marina, is this true?" Marina turned towards him, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "Of course not, my love. Your mother has become unhinged, consumed by her irrational hatred for me." "Don't listen to her lies, Adrian," I pleaded, my voice thick with emotion. "I have proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal." With trembling hands I produced the damning footage, the grainy images flickering to life on the small screen. Marina's face drained of color as she watched herself slinking through the house, pocketing valuables and sneaking out at odd hours. Adrian recoiled as if he'd been struck, his eyes boring into the incriminating evidence with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Marina, how could you?" Marina's composure cracked, her mask of innocence shattering like fragile glass. "You stupid, meddling old woman," she spat, her words laced with venom. You've ruined everything." In that moment, the veneer of civility fell away, revealing the true depths of Marina's depravity. She launched into a tirade of accusations and denials, her voice rising to a fever pitch as she lashed out like a cornered animal. Adrian simply sat there, stunned into silence, his world crumbling around him. Hank tried to intervene, his voice a calming balm in the midst of the storm. "Marina, please, let's all take a deep breath and—" "No," she snarled, her eyes wild with fury. "I'm done playing by your rules, done with all of your lies and manipulations." With a violent sweep of her arm, she sent the dishes crashing to the floor, shattering porcelain and scattering food in a chaotic mess. Lila, our sweet granddaughter, let out a terrified wail, her eyes wide with fear. In that moment, something shifted within Marina. Her expression hardened, her lips curling into a sneer of pure contempt. "You want the truth, Delilah? Fine. The truth is, I've been bleeding this family dry for months, and none of you were smart enough to catch on." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, their impact rendering us all speechless. Marina had finally shown her true colors, and the sight was as horrifying as it was vindicating. As she stormed out, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I had hope that our family could heal, that we could rebuild from the ashes of Marina's betrayal and emerge stronger, united by the bonds of love and loyalty. The war was won, but the scars would linger. And as I held Lila close, shielding her from the fallout, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, I would protect my family with every fiber of my being. The truth had set us free, but at what cost? The silence that followed Marina's explosive outburst was deafening, a palpable weight that seemed to press down upon us all. Adrian sat motionless, his face ashen, his eyes fixed on the space where his wife had stood moments earlier, hurling her venomous words like daggers. Hank was the first to break the spell, his voice low and measured. "Son, I'm so sorry. We tried to warn you, but—" Adrian held up a trembling hand, silencing his father. "Don't. Just don't." I watched helplessly as my son's world crumbled around him, the foundations of his life stripped bare by the harsh light of truth. Marina's betrayal had cut him to the core, and I ached to offer him comfort, to soothe the wounds inflicted by the woman he had loved and trusted. But before I could speak, the door creaked open, and Marina slunk back into the room, her eyes red-rimmed and her shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a weary resignation that hung like a shroud around her slight frame. "Adrian," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I owe you an explanation." Adrian stiffened, his jaw clenched, but he remained silent, granting her the opportunity to speak. Marina took a shuddering breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It started innocently enough, a few dollars here and there, just to feed my habit." My brow furrowed as the pieces began to fall into place. "Habit? What are you talking about?" Marina's gaze flickered to me, her eyes haunted. "Gambling. I have a problem, one that spiraled out of control." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the truth finally came to light. Marina, the woman we had welcomed into our family, the mother of our precious granddaughter, was a gambling addict, and she had been systematically bleeding us dry to fuel her addiction. "How could you?" Adrian's voice was a hoarse whisper, laced with heartbreak and disbelief. "How could you betray us like this?" Marina flinched as if struck, her eyes brimming with remorseful tears. "It started small, just a few dollars here and there to scratch the itch. But then the losses mounted, and I found myself digging a deeper and deeper hole, desperate to chase that high, to win it all back." Her words hung in the air, their weight suffocating. I thought back to all the signs, the unexplained expenditures, the missing valuables, all the breadcrumbs leading to this sordid truth. "And Lila?" Hank's voice was tight, his expression inscrutable. "Did you involve our granddaughter in your schemes?" Marina's head bowed in shame, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. I did. I manipulated her, promised her lavish gifts if she helped me take a few things here and there." A collective gasp of horror echoed through the room, and I felt my heart constrict with a pain so acute it stole my breath away. Marina had not only betrayed our trust, but had also corrupted the innocence of our sweet Lila, using her as a pawn in her twisted game. Adrian shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "Get out!" he growled, his voice thick with barely contained fury. "Get out of my house and never come back." Marina opened her mouth as if to protest, but one look at Adrian's thunderous expression seemed to quell any further objections. With a defeated nod, she rose to her feet and made her way towards the door, each step heavy with the weight of her sins. As she reached the threshold, she turned back, her eyes pleading. "Adrian, please, let me see Lila. I'll get help, I promise. Just don't take her away from me." But Adrian's resolve was unshakable, his love for his wife eclipsed by the depths of her betrayal. "You lost that right the moment you involved our daughter in your schemes. I'll be filing for full custody first thing in the morning." Marina's face crumpled, but she offered no further resistance. With a broken sob, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving a trail of shattered lives in her wake. As the door closed behind her, a heavy silence descended upon the room, punctuated only by the muffled sound of Lila's whimpers from the next room. In that moment, the weight of Marina's deceit crashed down upon us all, a tsunami of grief and anger that threatened to consume us whole. But even as the tides of emotion surged, I felt a glimmer of hope flicker to life within me. The truth, no matter how painful, had been laid bare, and from these ashes we would rebuild, one step at a time, one day at a time, until the wounds had healed and the scars had faded. It would be a long and arduous journey, but we would walk it together, as a family united by our love and our resilience. Marina's betrayal would not define us, it would be the catalyst for our rebirth, a crucible from which we would emerge stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. As I reached out to gather Adrian and Lila into my embrace, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, fortified by the unbreakable bonds of family and the healing power of truth. The days that followed Marina's explosive confession were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Adrian, steadfast in his resolve, wasted no time in filing for divorce and seeking full custody of Lila. "She doesn't get to slither back into our lives after what she's done," he declared, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Not until she's paid her debt to society and proven herself worthy of being a part of Lila's life again." As much as it pained me to see my son suffering, I couldn't help but swell with pride at the unwavering strength he displayed in the face of such devastating betrayal. Marina's deceit had cut him to the core, but instead of crumbling, he had risen like a phoenix from the ashes, driven by an unshakable determination to protect his daughter. The legal process was arduous, fraught with contentious hearings and bitter confrontations. Marina, perhaps sensing the gravity of her transgressions, offered little resistance, her once defiant spirit broken by the weight of her lies. In the end, justice prevailed. Marina was ordered to not only repay the staggering sum of money she had stolen from our family, but also to undergo a court-mandated rehabilitation program to address her gambling addiction. As for Lila, the judge granted Adrian full custody, with Marina receiving strictly supervised visitation rights, a harsh but necessary measure to ensure our granddaughter's well-being in the aftermath of her mother's deplorable actions. "She'll have the chance to rebuild her relationship with Lila," Adrian told me, his eyes shining with a mixture of resolution and cautious hope. "But only if she proves herself worthy of that privilege." Marina's sentencing was a bittersweet moment, a culmination of months of anguish and turmoil. As she stood before the judge, her shoulders slumped in defeat, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity amid the overwhelming sense of vindication. This woman, who had once been welcomed into our family with open arms, had fallen so far, consumed by the demons of her own making. Her descent into depravity had not only cost her our trust, but had also robbed her of the love and respect of her own daughter. As the gavel fell, sealing her fate, I saw a flicker of remorse in Marina's eyes. A fleeting glimpse of the person she might have been, untainted by the insidious grip of addiction. In that moment, I realized that true revenge lay not in her suffering but in our perseverance, our unwavering commitment to healing the wounds she had inflicted upon our family. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but we were ready to face it head-on, bolstered by the unbreakable bonds that had been forged in the crucible of Marina's betrayal. Hank and I became a constant presence in Adrian and Lila's lives, offering unwavering support and stability in the wake of their upheaval. Slowly but surely, we began to piece together the fragments of our fractured family, building anew on the foundations of love, trust, and resilience. Lila, bless her heart, proved to be our greatest source of strength and hope. Her innocent spirit, untainted by the darkness of her mother's actions, was a beacon that guided us through the darkest of times. "Why did Mommy do those bad things?" she would ask, her eyes wide and imploring. And in those moments, we would gather her close, assuring her that while her mother had made grave mistakes, she still loved her. A love that would have to be earned anew through painstaking effort and unwavering commitment. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars would forever serve as a reminder of the price we had paid for the truth. Marina, to her credit, seemed to embrace her court-mandated rehabilitation, her visits with Lila becoming less strained and more genuine with each passing week. It was during one such visit, as I watched Marina and Layla engage in a tentative yet tender exchange, that I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The anger and resentment that had once consumed me had given way to a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the resilience of my family, for the strength we had found in adversity, and for the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the storm. As Marina bid farewell to Lila, her eyes shone with a newfound clarity, a glimmer of the woman she had once been, untainted by the darkness that had nearly consumed her. In that moment, I realized that true victory lay not in her suffering, but in our ability to rise above it, to emerge from the ashes of her betrayal stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but we were ready to face them head-on, fortified by the unwavering love and support that had seen us through our darkest hours. As I watched Adrian and Lila laugh and play in the warm embrace of our family, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The truth had set us free, but it had also revealed the depths of our resilience and the unbreakable bonds that truly defined us. We were survivors, warriors forged in the fires of adversity, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever dim the light that burned within our hearts. The discovery hit me like a freight train, shattering the silence of the afternoon. As I sifted through the pile of neglected mail, my fingers trembled upon an envelope with the bold print, "Termination Notice." It was addressed to Nathan. My heart raced, confusion clouding my thoughts. Why would Nathan be terminated? The apartment felt colder, the air heavier, as if bracing for a storm. I dialed Nathan's number, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Julia, what's up?" Calling in the middle of the day? His voice, usually warm, now seemed distant, guarded. "Nathan, I found something odd in the mail. It's a termination notice." "What happened?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but panic laced my words. "I'm on a business trip in Seattle, Julia. Can't talk now. I'm in me later." The line went dead before I could protest. A business trip? The lie was blatant, almost insulting. Nathan hadn't mentioned any trips. My mind raced, piecing together his recent late nights and evasive answers. Something wasn't right. Needing clarity, I called my former boss, Linda. Her surprise at hearing my voice did little to ease my anxiety. "Julia Wells? This is unexpected. How can I help?" Linda's voice was warm but carried an undercurrent of confusion. "It's about Nathan. I found a termination notice, and he's saying he's on a business trip. I'm just trying to understand what's happening." My voice cracked, betraying my attempt at composure. There was a pause, heavy and loaded, before Linda responded. "Julia, you didn't know? Nathan was let go over a month ago. There was an incident. He leaked confidential information to a competitor." The room spun, and I struggled to breathe. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, coursed through me. "Leaked information? But why?" Linda sighed. "It's a mess, Julia. There were rumors about him and Eve, the new secretary. Both disappeared after the incident. It's believed she was involved with someone from the competitor's side. A setup, possibly." "Eve?" The name stung, a missing piece to a puzzle I hadn't realized I was assembling. Memories flashed, Nathan's late returns, his phone buzzing with messages he'd quickly hide. It all made sense now, a narrative of deceit I had been too blind to see. I need to think about this. Thank you, Linda." My voice was a whisper drowned out by the roaring in my ears. The call ended, leaving me adrift in a sea of betrayal. My marriage, built on love and trust, now lay in ruins, the foundation eroded by lies and infidelity. Nathan's voice echoed in my mind, a mocking reminder of the facade he had maintained. Anger bubbled within me, a fierce, burning need for retribution. Nathan and Eve, their deceit had not only shattered my trust, but jeopardized my future. They would not get away with this. I would make sure of it. As I stood in the silent apartment, a plan began to form. I would confront Nathan, demand answers, and then I would make them pay. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I intended to serve it frozen. With newfound resolve, I packed a bag. It was time to return to my family, to the home where love and honesty still held meaning. There I would heal, and there I would plot my next move. Nathan and Eve had awakened a fury within me, one that would not rest until justice was served. The drive back to my parents' house was a blur, the landscape passing by unnoticed. My thoughts were consumed by visions of confrontation and vindication. The once cherished memories of Nathan and me now soured, replaced by the bitter taste of betrayal. As the familiar outline of my parents' home came into view, a sense of determination settled over me. Nathan and Eve's deceit had marked the end of one chapter in my life, but it was also the beginning of another. One where I would reclaim my dignity and emerge stronger, no longer a victim of their treachery. The stage was set, the players aligned. It was time for the shadows of deceit to give way to the light of retribution. Returning to my family's home felt like stepping into a different world, one where the shadows of Nathan's betrayal couldn't reach. The warmth of the hearth and the familiar scent of wood shavings offered a balm to my bruised heart. Yet as I settled into the rhythm of my childhood home, the contrast between my past and present couldn't have been starker. My father, ever the stoic craftsman, noticed my turmoil. "Julia, you're home early. Is everything all right?" His voice, roughened by years of work, carried a note of concern. I forced a smile, the weight of my secret heavy on my shoulders. "Just needed a break from the city, Dad. It's nice to be back." He nodded, sensing the unspoken words between us. "Well, you're always welcome here. This home is your sanctuary." The dinner table was a tableau of familial warmth, a stark contrast to the cold lies Nathan had served. My mother's keen eyes watched me, her intuition sharp. "Julia, you've been quiet tonight. Is there something on your mind?" The floodgates opened. Under the soft glow of the dining room light, I spilled the bitter truth of Nathan's deceit, his affair with Eve, and the termination notice that had shattered my world. My brother Alex clenched his fists, the muscles in his jaw working. "That coward! To think he'd betray you like this, and with a secretary no less. He'll regret this, Julia. I'll make sure of it." "No, Alex," I interjected, my voice firm despite the turmoil within. "This is my battle. I'll handle Nathan and Eve. They'll pay for what they've done." The resolve in my family's eyes fortified my own. This betrayal would not define me. Nathan and Eve's deception would be met with a reckoning, one crafted with the precision and care my family poured into their work. In the days that followed, my sanctuary became a fortress of planning. The serene backdrop of the woods and the workshop's steady rhythm fueled my resolve. I began documenting everything, collecting evidence of Nathan's betrayal and his professional misconduct. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin I was building for Nathan's deceit. One afternoon, as I sat in the workshop, surrounded by the comforting scent of cedar and maple, my phone rang. It was Nathan, his voice oozing false concern. "Julia, darling, why haven't you been answering my calls? I've been worried about you." The term of endearment, once sweet, now tasted like poison. "Worried? That's rich, Nathan. Or should I be asking Eve how concerned you really are?" There was a pause, a moment of silence where the facade cracked. "Julia, it's not what you think. Eve is just a colleague. Nothing more." I laughed, a sound sharp and cold. "Save your lies, Nathan. I know about the termination notice, the affair, everything. You're nothing but a coward who hides behind lies and deceit." Nathan's voice hardened, the mask slipping further. "You're overreacting, Julia. We can talk about this. Fix it." "Fix it?" My voice rose, fueled by anger and betrayal. "There's nothing left to fix. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." I hung up, cutting off any retort he might have had. The finality of the act was liberating, a declaration of war against the man who had vowed to love and protect me. As the days turned into weeks, my resolve only strengthened. With my family's support, I began to rebuild, finding solace in the beauty of nature and the legacy of craftsmanship that had defined my lineage. My heart, though bruised, began to mend, fortified by the knowledge that retribution was within reach. Nathan and Eve's day of reckoning was coming. The echoes of their deceit would be drowned out by the whispers of retribution, a melody I intended to compose with meticulous care. The stage was set, and I was ready to take my stand. The next phase of my plan unfolded with a cold, deliberate precision. Armed with evidence of Nathan's duplicity and his affair with Eve, I sought legal counsel, ready to sever the ties that bound us in matrimony and deceit. My lawyer, a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering resolve, listened intently as I laid bare the extent of Nathan's betrayal. As far as cases go, Julia, this one is as clear-cut as they come. We'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and emotional distress. And rest assured, we'll make sure Nathan and his accomplice face the consequences of their actions, she assured me, her voice laced with a promise of retribution. Fueled by a mix of vindication and sorrow, I returned home, where my family awaited, their support unwavering. It was during these moments, surrounded by the comforting embrace of my family, that my resolve hardened. Nathan and Eve's deception would not go unpunished. The confrontation I had longed for came sooner than expected. Nathan, in a rare moment of courage or perhaps folly, arrived at my parents' doorstep, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Julia, we need to talk. I can explain everything," he began, stepping into the living room where my family and I stood united. "Explain? Explain how you lied, cheated, and risked our future for a fling?" My voice was calm, but beneath the surface, a storm raged. "It wasn't just a fling, Julia. Eve, she understands me in ways you never did," Nathan countered, his words slicing through the air like a knife. The room fell silent, the audacity of his admission hanging heavily between us. My brother Alex stepped forward, his anger barely contained. "You're pathetic, Nathan, to come here into our home and insult my sister with your vile excuses." "Enough," I interjected, my gaze locked on Nathan. "Your words mean nothing to me now. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. We're done, Nathan. I want a divorce, and I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of man you truly are." Nathan's facade crumbled, revealing a glimpse of the cowardice I had come to despise. "Julia, please, let's not make this messier than it needs to be. Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it, Nathan. Every single day and night since I discovered your betrayal, you're the one who hasn't thought about the consequences of your actions. But you will. Oh, you will," I promised, my words icy. With that, Nathan left, his departure as unremarkable as his presence had become in my life. The door closing behind him felt symbolic, the final chapter of our shared life ending with a soft yet resounding click. In the days that followed, the legal proceedings began. Every step, from filing the divorce papers to serving Nathan with the notice, felt like shedding the weight of a life built on lies. The evidence of his infidelity and the repercussions of his professional misconduct painted a damning picture, one that left little room for sympathy. The community, once oblivious to Nathan's true nature, began to see him for what he was. His reputation, both personal and professional, unraveled, a fitting retribution for the pain he had caused. Eve, too, found herself ostracized, her role in Nathan's life, and their collective betrayal exposed for all to see. As the legal battle waged on, I found strength in my family's unwavering support and the work that grounded me. The workshop, with its chorus of hammers and saws, became my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the beauty of creation and the simplicity of honest labor. Nathan and Eve's downfall was a slow, inevitable spiral, their actions catching up to them in a cascade of legal and social repercussions. The satisfaction of seeing justice served was bittersweet, a reminder of the cost of their betrayal. Yet amidst the chaos, I found peace. The veil of deceit had been lifted, revealing a path forward, one where I could rebuild my life on my terms, surrounded by the love and integrity of my family. The chapter of Nathan and Eve was closing, but mine was just beginning, a narrative of resilience, redemption, and ultimately renewal. In the weeks that followed Nathan's departure and the initiation of our legal battles, I immersed myself in the work and traditions of my family's craft. The workshop, with its timeless rhythm and the scent of fresh wood, became my solace and my strength. It was here, amid the shavings and the sculptures, that a plan began to take shape. A plan not just for revenge, but for reclaiming my life and legacy. My parents, sensing a change within me, offered their silent support, their love a constant amidst the turmoil. It was during one of our evening gatherings, the golden light of sunset filtering through the windows, that my father spoke up, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "Julia, your mother and I have been talking. We know you're going through a lot, but we also see the strength in you. The workshop. It's always been a part of who we are, and we think it's time it became a part of your future too." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord within me. The workshop wasn't just a place of business. It was a legacy, a testament to the values and skills passed down through generations. And now it was offering me a path forward, a way to rebuild and to make Nathan and Eve's betrayal a distant memory. As I pondered my father's words, my brother Alex brought news that added fuel to my resolve. "I heard from a friend in town, Nathan and Eve. They're trying to spin the story, make it seem like you were the one at fault." Anger flared within me, hot and fierce. "They're trying to tarnish my name? After everything they've done?" Alex nodded, his own anger mirroring mine. "But they're not finding it easy. Seems your story, the truth, is already out there. People are siding with you, Julia. Nathan and Eve, they're the ones being shunned." The news was a balm to my wounded heart. The community's support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. It reinforced my determination to not only clear my name, but to ensure Nathan and Eve faced the full consequences of their actions. With renewed purpose, I threw myself into the workshop, learning the intricacies of our craft from my father and the other artisans. Each piece I worked on, each design I sketched, felt like a step away from my past and toward a new beginning. And as I worked, I planned. The evidence I had gathered against Nathan and Eve was damning, but I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted to expose them for who they truly were, to show the world their deceit and their cowardice. My opportunity came sooner than expected. A local community event, a showcase of artisans and craftsmen from our area, was approaching. It was the perfect platform to not only promote our family's work, but to publicly reclaim my story. "I'm going to present at the event," I announced to my family one evening, a sense of purpose infusing my words. "It's time I stepped out of the shadows Nathan and Eve tried to cast over me." My family's approval was unanimous, their pride in my resilience a tangible thing. Preparations for the event began in earnest, with each of us contributing to the collection of pieces we would display. But my contribution would be more than just crafts. It would be my declaration of independence from Nathan's betrayal, a showcase of strength forged in the fires of adversity. The day of the event arrived, a buzz of excitement filling the air as the community gathered to celebrate local talent. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and anticipation as I took my place behind our display, the woodwork gleaming under the soft lights. As I spoke to the attendees, explaining the history and the heart behind each piece, I felt a sense of empowerment. Nathan and Eve's attempt to undermine me had failed. Here, among my peers and my community, I stood tall, my reputation untarnished. And then, amidst the crowd, I saw them. Nathan and Eve, their expressions a mix of surprise and unease as they realized the support surrounding me. The moment our eyes met, I knew. The battle may have been long and painful, but the victory was mine. Their deceit had been exposed, their reputations irrevocably damaged by their own actions. The event was a triumph, not just for our family's business, but for me personally. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger, my spirit unbroken. Nathan and Eve's shadows no longer loomed over me. I had stepped into the light, my future bright with promise and possibility. As the community rallied around me, offering congratulations and support, I realized that this was just the beginning. My journey from the depths of despair to the heights of redemption was a testament to the power of resilience and the unbreakable bonds of family. Nathan and Eve had sought to destroy me, but in their malice, they had only forged a stronger, more determined Julia Wells. And as I looked toward the future, I knew there was nothing I couldn't overcome. In the aftermath of the community event, the winds of change began to blow through my life with a newfound intensity. The support of the community had not only bolstered my spirits, but had also painted a target on Nathan and Eve's backs. Their attempts to navigate the social circles they once dominated were met with cold shoulders and disdainful whispers. My story, rooted in truth and resilience, had reshaped the narrative, casting them in the stark light of reality. As the divorce proceedings advanced, I was summoned to a mediation session, a final attempt to resolve matters without further court intervention. The prospect of facing Nathan and Eve, not just as the wronged party, but as an empowered woman reclaiming her narrative, filled me with a sense of grim satisfaction. The mediation room was sterile, the air thick with tension. Nathan sat across from me, his usual arrogance replaced by a sullen resignation. Eve was not present, a fact that spoke volumes about the fractures in their facade. "Nathan, we're here to finalize the terms of the divorce. It's clear that the marriage cannot be salvaged," the mediator began, her voice neutral yet firm. Nathan's gaze met mine, a flicker of something. Regret, perhaps, or merely the realization of his impending downfall, crossed his face. "Julia, I know I messed up. I never meant for things to go this far," he stammered, his voice lacking its usual confidence. The words, meant to elicit sympathy, only fueled my resolve. "Messed up? You betrayed our vows, Nathan. This goes beyond a simple mistake. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. The mediator interjected, "Let's focus on the division of assets and any financial settlements. Julia, your lawyer has presented a compelling case for substantial compensation considering Nathan's infidelity and the impact on your life." Nathan bristled at the mention of compensation. "This is extortion. I admit I made mistakes, but to ruin me financially." "Ruin you?" I cut in, my patience wearing thin. "You ruined our marriage, Nathan. Whatever financial consequences you face are the result of your own actions. Actions that have consequences. It's time you learned that." The mediator, sensing the futility of further discussion, moved to finalize the paperwork. The settlement was in my favor, a testament to the strength of my case and the evidence of Nathan's wrongdoing. As we left the mediation room, Nathan paused, turning to me with a look of desperation. "Julia, please, can't we just put this behind us? For the sake of what we had?" What we had. The words were a knife to my heart, a reminder of the love I once felt, now tarnished by betrayal. What we had died the moment you chose Eve over our marriage. Goodbye, Nathan. With those final words, I walked away, leaving Nathan and the wreckage of our marriage behind. The legal battle was over, but the fight to rebuild my life was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, my focus turned to the workshop and the burgeoning success of our family business. The community's support had translated into increased interest in sales, a silver lining in the dark cloud of the past months. Yet, as the business thrived, I couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business. Nathan and Eve's social and professional downfall was a form of justice, but it was the inner work, the healing and rebuilding of my own life, that required my attention. I poured my energy into the workshop, finding solace in the creation of beautiful things. Each piece I crafted was a step towards healing, a tangible representation of my journey from betrayal to strength. The community event, once a platform for my public vindication, became an annual tradition, a celebration of resilience and the enduring spirit of our town. My story, once a tale of pain and betrayal, had transformed into a narrative of empowerment and renewal. Nathan and Eve faded into the background, their attempts to reclaim their former lives thwarted by their own actions. The community, once deceived by their facade, now saw them for who they truly were. As for me, I emerged from the ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The betrayal that once threatened to break me had instead forged a new path, one where I stood tall, unafraid, and ready to face whatever the future held. The seasons changed, as did the narrative of my life. The community event had not only become a cornerstone for our family business, but also a testament to the enduring strength of character over the deceit and betrayal that Nathan and Eve had sown. As the workshop flourished, so did my resolve to move past the shadows of my former life. Yet, the true test of my newfound strength was just on the horizon. A year had passed since the divorce was finalized when a twist of fate brought Nathan and Eve back into my orbit. The local news carried stories of a scandal involving a significant business in town, ensnared in deceit and fraudulent activities. At the heart of the scandal were Nathan and Eve, their actions finally catching up to them in a very public downfall. The community's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Nathan and Eve, once fixtures of the social scene, found themselves ostracized, their reputations in tatters. It was during this time that Eve reached out to me, a desperate attempt to salvage what little she could from the ruins of their actions. "Julia, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm begging you to listen." Eve's voice trembled over the phone, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had once stood by Nathan's side. "Eve, you're right. You have no right. After everything you and Nathan did, why should I listen to anything you have to say?" My voice was cold, the bitterness of the past still lingering. "I understand your anger, Julia, but it's Nathan. He's in trouble, serious trouble. The business scandal has ruined him, and he's not handling it well," Eve pleaded, desperation coloring her every word. The news of Nathan's downfall, though expected, brought no joy. The man I had once loved, now a shadow of his former self, was a stark reminder of the consequences of one's actions. "Eve, Nathan's troubles are his own making. You both made your choices, and now you must live with them. My life has moved on, and I suggest you do the same," I replied, the finality in my voice leaving no room for further discussion. The call ended, but the news of Nathan's scandal lingered, a topic of hushed conversations and whispered speculations in the community. Yet, amidst the schadenfreude, a sense of closure enveloped me. Nathan and Eve's public downfall was the retribution their actions had wrought, a karmic justice for the pain they had caused. In the wake of their scandal, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had undertaken. From the depths of betrayal to the heights of personal and professional success, my path had been fraught with challenges. Yet each obstacle had only served to strengthen my resolve, to forge me into a woman who faced adversity with grace and determination. The workshop, once a refuge from my pain, had become a beacon of my resilience. The pieces we created, each imbued with the essence of our family's legacy, were more than just objects of beauty. They were symbols of a life reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. As the scandal surrounding Nathan and Eve faded into the background, my focus remained on the future. The support of the community, once a lifeline in my darkest moments, had become a foundation upon which I built my new life. My story, once marred by the actions of others, was now solely my own, a narrative of triumph over adversity. Nathan and Eve's downfall, while a fitting end to their tale of deceit, was merely a footnote in mine. My journey had taught me that true strength lies not in the vengeance we seek, but in the resilience we demonstrate in the face of life's inevitable trials. As I stood in the workshop, surrounded by the fruits of our labor, I realized that the greatest retribution was not the downfall of those who had wronged me, but the life I had built in spite of them. My legacy would not be defined by Nathan and Eve's betrayal, but by the strength, love, and integrity that had seen me through the storm. And so, with my head held high and my heart at peace, I looked toward the future, ready to embrace whatever it held, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same strength and resilience that had brought me this far. Nathan and Eve's chapter in my life was closed, but mine was still being written, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome, to heal, and to thrive. "Worthless," Aunt Clara muttered under her breath as she strode past me, not even attempting to lower her voice. I glanced up from my sketchbook just in time to see the disdain written across her face before she turned away. I looked down again quickly, gripping my pencil tighter while trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. I sat tucked away in the back corner of my aunt and uncle's overcrowded living room, sketching quietly during our family's monthly gathering. All around me, chatter and laughter echoed off the walls as my relatives socialized, doused in a healthy glow of wine. I did my best to make myself small and unnoticed. It wasn't difficult. I'd had 15 years of practice. "Did you see Theo's last game, though?" My mom's voice rang out loudly from the kitchen. 2 touchdowns. They won by a landslide. A chorus of cheers and congratulations erupted in response. I snuck a glance across the room at my cousin holding court over a captive audience, grinning from ear to ear. His Letterman jacket hung proudly over the back of his chair, trophy glinting under the lights. I looked back at my sketchbook just as Aunt Clara walked by again. She stopped short this time, narrowing her eyes as she spotted my work. "Still scribbling away as usual, I see," she noted in a tone that landed somewhere between curiosity and disgust. "Don't you have homework to be doing or something?" I pressed my lips together, staring intently at my paper. "I finished it already." Well, I suppose it's harmless enough," she dismissed with a wave of her ring-laden hand before walking away. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Her words echoed in my ears. Worthless, harmless. I knew she thought both about me and my art. Somewhere deep down, I feared the worst part was she could be right. I jumped as a gentle hand grasped my shoulder. I looked up to see Uncle Max's kind eyes peering down at me through his thick glasses. "Don't listen to her, Lila," he said softly. "I think what you create is lovely." I managed a small smile in return, comforted more by the solidarity of his gaze than the compliment itself. Uncle Max was the only one who ever bothered to look closely at my drawings. He seemed to understand the pangs of being overlooked amid the symphony of other people's noise. As he gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze before walking away, I realized this monthly gathering marked the third in a row he had offered me those same gentle words. Don't listen to her. His reassuring gestures were becoming something of a ritual, I mused. One I appreciated more deeply each time. The lively hum of the party clambered on around me, but I felt cocooned by Uncle Max's kindness. I allowed myself to become reabsorbed by the strokes of my pencil, applying darker depth and definition to the portrait emerging on my page. I didn't hear Aunt Claire approach until her shadow was upon me. "I swear, Lila, it's like you live in your own little world sometimes," she scoffed, craning her neck to catch a glimpse of my work. "What are you making that's got you so tuned out anyway?" Before I could respond, she snatched the sketchbook from my lap, already laughing. "Oh, honey, when are you going to grow up?" she cried loudly, her shrill voice cutting through the din. "You can't pay the bills with silly little doodles like this." Faces turned in our direction as heat flooded my cheeks. I stared hard at the floor, willing myself not to cry as a few stray snickers arose. Aunt Clara carelessly dropped my sketchbook back in my lap and strode away, gravelly laugh still spilling from her lips. "Why put in so much effort for something so worthless?" she called over her shoulder. The words pierced my fragile pride, every letter another knife twist to my heart. I hugged my sketchbook tightly to my chest, barely holding back tears. Maybe she was right after all. "Pass the potatoes, please," Aunt Clara demanded, her shrill voice cutting through the chatter around the dinner table as she leaned back in her seat. I quietly handed her the platter, avoiding eye contact and hoping to avoid provoking another of her cutting remarks. It was Thanksgiving, after all. The one day of the year our family insisted on coming together despite the simmering tensions. My hope of getting through dinner unscathed was short-lived. As usual, the conversation quickly turned to comparing my lackluster achievements to Theo's latest accolades. Theo made varsity quarterback as a sophomore. Uncle Ralph boasted loudly between bites of turkey and stuffing. Youngest one in years. "He's the real deal." A round of hearty congratulations followed as Theo grinned, basking in the glow of adoration and free-flowing wine. "I told you he'd be the star of the family," Aunt Clara joined in gleefully. "Brains and talent, he has it all, not to mention that beautiful girlfriend of his." She let out an exaggerated sigh. "My, they will have the cutest baby someday. Can't you just picture it?" More laughter and smiles of agreement rippled around the long table. I sank lower in my chair and pushed a few peas around my plate, face burning. His life did seem pretty perfect, I admitted resentfully to myself. Quarterback, straight A's, leggy blonde doting on his every word. With a dejected exhale, I let my eyes wander around the room, carefully avoiding the golden boy himself. As an involuntary reflex, my gaze landed on my sketchbook, peeking out from my bag in the corner behind Uncle Max's wingback chair. Just like its owner, tucked away, forgotten, worthless. At that moment, Aunt Clara's grating voice cut through my gloom. "It's such a shame not all young people live up to their potential." My eyes snapped to hers at the other end of the table. Her expression feigned sympathy, but I saw the malice flashing behind it. Poor Lila just drifts through life. I don't know how she'll ever amount to anything meaningful without some sparks flying up in that head of hers. Cold dread crept down my spine at the thinly veiled insult. Before I could open my mouth to respond, I felt a large hand firmly grasp my knee under the table. Uncle Max subtly shook his head, silently warning me not to engage. I bristled in frustration but held my tongue. Max gave my leg a supportive squeeze before removing his hand. "Well, what about David?" Aunt Edna chimed in nervously, attempting to reroute the conversation down safer terrain. "How's that mathematics doctorate coming along?" As the attention shifted, I quietly excused myself from the table. I strode swiftly to the corner and snatched up my sketchbook, fleeing to the dark solitude of the back porch. The cold night air bit at my wet cheeks, but I paid it no mind. I sank down on the porch steps, angrily swiping away tears. How dare she? I fumed, hands clenching and unclenching. Who is she to assume she knows my potential? After several shuddering breaths, my rage began to morph into despair. What if Aunt Clara was right? Maybe I would never amount to anything. I gazed forlornly down at my latest sketch, a portrait of Aunt Edna. The intricate details in her kind, wrinkled face had taken me hours to perfect. But what was the point if no one cared? It was worthless, just like me. A warm weight settled around my slumped shoulders, Uncle Max's wool coat. He eased down next to me with a soft groan, eyeglasses glinting in the moonlight. We sat without a word for several moments, my uneven breath sounding loud in the stillness. Finally, Max broke the heavy silence. "Don't listen to her poison, Lila," he urged gently. "She's just threatened by what she can't understand." He tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "But I understand, and I believe your art means something, just like you do." Tears spilled down my face once more, but this time they were tears of gratitude. I slipped quietly out the back door into the crisp night air, carefully closing it behind me before the sounds of the boisterous family gathering could follow me outside. I shrugged my jacket tighter around my shoulders against the chill. Autumn leaves crunched under my shoes as I made my way across the wide back porch and settled onto the wooden steps. Uncle Max and I had taken to meeting here, outside the stuffy, chaotic warmth of my aunt and uncle's home, where the family parties always took place. Here we could talk freely without judgmental ears listening in. Over the last few months since that painful Thanksgiving dinner, Max had become my ally and confidant. The back door creaked open, and I looked up to see Max's tall frame silhouetted in the golden light. He held up the pleated paper bag, clenched in his wrinkled hand, and waved it with a triumphant grin as he eased himself down beside me. "Got them! Had to fight off Martha for the last package." He chuckled in his warm, gravelly tone. He pulled out 2 large sugar cookies, handing me one. I bit into the sweet icing with delight. "Thanks, Uncle Max. You're the best." He smiled, his kind eyes twinkling behind his glasses in the dim glow of the porch light. "I know they're your favorite. I figured you deserved something sweet after all that bitterness earlier." I sighed, smile fading. "She's just never going to accept me, is she?" Max shook his head. "Oh, don't worry about Clara. She's set in her ways, but she's all talk." He gave my shoulder a reassuring pat. "Now tell me what you've been up to." My mood lifted instantly. I applied to the Ridley Art Academy summer program. It's only a few weeks, but they have these amazing classes, and... Max held up a hand, eyes widening in surprise. "Applied? Have you told your parents about this?" I bit my lip, smile disappearing. "No. Mom agrees with Aunt Clara that art is just silly hobby. They'd never take it seriously or support me." Max frowned, leaning back against the porch railing. He seemed to be turning something over in his mind. "Lila," he finally said, "your art, your dreams, they matter. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." He paused, brow furrowing in thought. "In fact, I'd like to help, if you'll let me." I stared, confused but intrigued. "Help how?" "Well, clearly, Clara controls the family purse strings, but there are other resources." He reached out and took my hand, giving it an encouraging squeeze. "Let me fund your art academy tuition, anonymously, of course," he added with a conspiratorial wink. "It can be our secret." My eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Uncle Max, that's incredibly generous, but I could never ask you to." He held up a hand. "You're not asking, I'm offering. I believe in you, Lila, and I want to invest in that talent of yours before anyone tries to snuff it out." His words brought tears to my eyes. After years of discouragement, someone was finally taking me and my art seriously. I threw my arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. "Thank you," I choked out through my tears. "I promise I won't waste this opportunity." Max chuckled, patting my back gently. "Of course you won't. I expect a full portfolio of new pieces when you get back." He pulled away, holding me by the shoulders and gazing at me intently. "Just promise me that from now on, you'll start listening to your own voice instead of theirs. Deal?" I took a deep breath and wiped the remaining moisture from my eyes, feeling as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from my soul. Deal? Deal. I crept up the creaky attic steps as stealthily as I could, clutching my latest art supply store purchase. Even with Uncle Max generously funding my artistic pursuits in secret for the past few months, I still felt like a fugitive, sneaking around behind my family's back. But the flush of excitement I felt unboxing shiny new artist pastels made the whole cloak and dagger act worthwhile. I had discovered I loved working with color almost as much as Mom disapproved of my artistic dabbling, as she called it. I smiled to myself, lifting the basement trapdoor slowly. Better to ask her forgiveness later than permission now. Just as the door was about to latch silently behind me, a shrill voice bellowed up from below. "Lila Grace, what in heaven's name are you doing up there?" Aunt Clara's harsh tones echoed off the attic walls, causing me to jump. The pastels tumbled out of my hands, clattering down the steps along with my heart. "Nothing, Aunt Clara," I stammered, scrambling to collect my forbidden treasures strewn across the aging floorboards before she ascended. My efforts were in vain, however, as her heavy footsteps soon thudded behind me. I wheeled around to find Clara glaring down at the vibrant sticks gripped in my hands, eyebrows raised. Wordlessly, she extended her palm. Sheepishly, I handed her the receipt, clutched in my other hand. Squinting through her bifocals, she examined it for several moments while I held my breath. $84.76, she finally exclaimed. "You spent nearly $100 on coloring sticks?" "They're oil pastels," I corrected under my breath. Her sharp eyes snapped to mine. "What was that?" I shrank back against the chill wall. "Nothing. I just used some extra babysitting money, that's all." "Seems like quite a lot of babysitting," she said skeptically. "And just what do you plan to do with these anyway?" Before I could respond, the attic door unexpectedly swung open. We both turned to see Uncle Max mount the last step, slightly out of breath. "There you both are. They're asking for you downstairs, Claire." He addressed my aunt lightly, but his eyes remained steadily locked with mine. Clara glanced between us, lips pursed in suspicion, but she merely let out an impatient huff before tossing the receipt to the floor. "We're not done discussing your little shopping addiction, young lady," she snapped as she brushed past Max. Once her footsteps retreated, I let out the breath I had been holding. "Thank you," I exhaled with relief. Max brushed aside my gratitude with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry about her." Yet behind his casual tone, his brows knitted with concern. I sighed, sadness suddenly deflating my mood as I sunk down onto an old cedar chest. "She's right, though. I can't keep sneaking around like this forever." I lifted my gaze to meet my uncle's kind eyes. "Especially using money you work so hard for. It's too much," I confessed softly. Max crossed the room and crouched down in front of me, gently cupping my chin in his aged hand. "Nonsense. That light I see ignite in you when you create is worth every penny. Don't let Clara make you feel otherwise," he urged. His voice took on an icy edge. "And don't you dare give up." My eyes misted over with emotion. I covered his sturdy hand with my own trembling one. "I won't," I promised in a whisper, "as long as you believe in me." Max smiled then, a smile so warm and full of affection that in that moment I felt I could conquer anything. I paced the threadbare living room carpet, absently winding a lock of hair around my finger. The early morning sun streamed in through the crocheted curtains, glinting off the crystal vase on the coffee table. Usually the colorful wildflowers Aunt Edna lovingly arranged lifted my mood, but today I barely noticed them. "What's got you wearing a groove into my rug so early, child?" I spun to find Edna peering at me curiously from the doorway, already impeccably dressed for the day ahead despite the early hour. I smiled weakly, clearing my throat. "Just thinking about the regional young artist competition," I explained, aiming unsuccessfully for a casual tone. "The application deadline is at the end of the week." Edna nodded knowingly as she settled herself onto the overstuffed sofa. Clara still refuses to support such nonsense. She made air quotes with her manicured fingers, eliciting a small chuckle from me despite the circumstances. My fleeting laughter quickly faded back into a grimace. She said if I waste my time entering, I'm also wasting her money. Basically, she's threatening to cut me off if I apply. My shoulders slumped dejectedly at the memory of my aunt's cruel ultimatum from the night before. Before the defeat could fully settle across my face, I felt Edna's graceful hand under my chin, gently tilting my eyes back up to meet her earnest gaze. "Lila, has Clara ever created anything of beauty or value in her entire life?" she asked pointedly. I slowly shook my head, confused but captivated by the sudden fire in her tone. "No. Yet for some bizarre reason, she still believes she is entitled to have authority over yours," Edna continued. Her eyes softened then, brow creasing in motherly concern as she brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Promise me you won't allow her to dictate your worth, sweetheart," she implored. "Don't sacrifice your talent to satisfy that bitter, jealous snake of a woman. She doesn't deserve that power over you." I blinked back, the hot tears suddenly burning behind my eyes. Overcome with emotion, I wrapped my arms around her slender shoulders. "Thank you, Aunt Edna," I whispered into her soft gray hair. In response, she squeezed me tightly, patting my back with her smooth hand. As we finally pulled apart, I caught sight of Uncle Max standing quietly in the doorway behind us. Our eyes met, a silent question hanging between us. "Well, what now?" I took a deep, shaky breath. Hope and fear dueled within me. But seeing the unwavering conviction shining from Max's gaze, I knew I only had one real option. I turned back to Edna with newfound resolve. "You're both right. She doesn't control me. I'm submitting my portfolio, with or without her approval." A slow grin spread across my uncle's wrinkled face. Edna let out a delighted laugh, lightly swatting my knee. "Atta girl!" Max pronounced proudly. He gestured to the unseen painting upstairs that he had secretly financed for my application. "Now, let's make sure they see exactly what they'll be missing out on." Buoyed by their belief in me, I marched from the room with fresh purpose fueling every step. I was through hiding myself and my art away. For the first time, I felt brave enough to stand up for my dreams, no matter the cost. I took a deep, centering breath as I pushed open the tall glass gallery doors. The familiar smells of paint, turpentine, and fresh lacquer washed over me, instantly sparking my creativity. I felt at home here among these floors and walls that showcased artistic vision instead of suppressing it. Unlike my own home, I thought ruefully. I wound through the maze of partition walls displaying the regional Young Artists Contest submissions, searching for my collection. My heels clicked crisply on the polished concrete floors, echoing through the cavernous space. Despite having captured first prize in the competition last month, the thrill of that victory had been short-lived. Oh sure, Edna and Max had celebrated exuberantly on my behalf, toasting my talent with a bottle of contraband champagne, but my parents could barely mutter a half-hearted congratulations through tight lips. Mother refused to even glance at the museum passes and tuition voucher the contest awarded me. And Aunt Clara, she had flown into such a jealous rage when she learned of my win that she stormed off in disgust, vowing to never speak to me again. Her reaction still stung, marring what should have been a shining moment of validation. I rounded a corner, and there suddenly were my paintings, a collection of vivid, abstract cityscapes titled Overlooked Beauty. I traced a gentle finger down the gilded plaque bearing my name, allowing myself a small, satisfied smile. No matter their reaction, this was still an incredible honor at just 18. These pieces represented my true vision, not anyone else's expectations of what art, or my future, should look like. My smile slipped as footsteps echoed behind me, followed by a grating chuckle that could only belong to one person. I steeled myself as Clara's scowl appeared over my shoulder in the painting's reflective glass. "Well, it's about time you grew up and started painting something worthwhile," she proclaimed with begrudging approval. Her critical eye assessed the building's luminous geometries and brooding alleyways. "At least these I can actually recognize as art, instead of that avant-garde nonsense you usually dirty a canvas with." I clenched my fists behind my back, holding back the acid retort on the tip of my tongue. As I met her baleful gaze in the glass, I realized defending my work was no longer needed. The prize ribbons did that for me now. I simply cleared my throat and gestured to a nearby painting of a crumbling liquor store glowing vibrantly against a stormy sky. The buildings no one else notices often hold the most beauty inside, I offered mildly. It's all about perspective. Clara narrowed her eyes, processing the subtle meaning behind my words. Before she could supply a scathing rebuttal, however, Max suddenly materialized beside us. "There you both are. Lila, the gallery director, is looking for you," he interjected smoothly, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. "The mayor wants to discuss commissioning a city mural. Shall we?" He guided me away without another glance at Clara's dumbfounded expression. As we walked, I felt lighter and more self-assured than I had in years. The Aunt Claras of the world would always try to hide my shine out of jealousy. But it was getting far harder to dim my inner light these days, especially with Uncle Max so devoted to stoking my creative fire. A waiter crossed in front of me, obscuring my view of the gallery's entrance for a moment. I tracked him impatiently with my eyes as he wove through the well-dressed crowd, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres on a silver platter. When he finally moved aside, I caught sight of Aunt Clara making yet another dramatic entrance. I grimaced to myself behind my own champagne flute. Trust Clara to be fashionably late to an event celebrating someone else's success. She glided into the gallery in a slinky black dress more suited to a cocktail party than an art show, air-kissing the room as all eyes turned to admire her. I noticed more than a few men's gazes linger a bit too long on her overly accentuated curves as she held court. "Quite an eye-catching woman," Max commented discreetly as he appeared beside me, following my irritated gaze. "She knows it too," I muttered before taking another sip. "But let her preen. Tonight is about my art, not her." Max smiled and clinked his glass gently against mine. "I'll toast to that." Any further conversation was interrupted by the gallery director's amplified voice welcoming the crowd. I thanked her politely as she congratulated me on the turnout and praised my evocative urban scenes. As she moved away to confer briefly with the curator, Clara slinked up in her wake. "Well, congratulations, dear," she purred with mock sincerity, air-kissing my cheek. "Who knew your silly little pastime might actually lead somewhere?" Her patronizing smile didn't reach her eyes. I suppose beauty is subjective after all. I resisted the urge to wipe off her cloying lipstick. "How gracious of you to come, Aunt Clara," I replied evenly instead, "since I know how subjective creative pursuits can be for you." Clara's painted smile faded slightly. Before she could supply what was surely a scorching retort, the director returned to the microphone, bringing the chatter to a close. "Again, we are so pleased to showcase this promising young talent's unique perspective," she said, gesturing toward me. "It's clear Lila has a fresh, meaningful artistic vision, one that her Uncle Max should be very proud of cultivating." Murmurs of appreciation echoed from the audience along with a smattering of applause. Clara's head swiveled sharply between me and Max. Under the weight of her glare, understanding visibly dawned across her primped features, followed swiftly by outrage. But before she could cause a scene, I stepped forward, holding up a gracious hand to acknowledge the accolades. "Actually, my Aunt Clara deserves quite a lot of credit for the inspiration behind this collection," I interjected smoothly into the microphone. "In fact, the title, Overlooked Beauty, is an homage to her unique perspective on my creative potential over the years." I turned to lock eyes with Clara, whose face had turned nearly purple. But true vision lies in those willing to look closer and nurture unseen gifts, not suppress them, regardless of popular opinion. I smiled benignly. "Don't you agree, Aunt Clara?" Her mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish under the weight of too many eyes and the hidden accusation in my words. For once it seemed Clara had no clever retort or searing glance to offer in return. I smiled wider. "I thought so. Cheers to fresh vision." "Then," I declared brightly, raising my glass. The crowd, oblivious to our true conversational undercurrents, echoed my toast eagerly, much to Aunt Clara's dismay. I stepped back to scrutinize my latest mural sketch, pencil smudges staining my hands. The city council had commissioned a stylized landscape to adorn the community center's remodeled facade. I wanted it to capture the neighborhood's vitality and cultural roots. As I reached for a rag to wipe the charcoal from my fingers, my phone vibrated loudly against the work table. I smiled involuntarily when I saw Uncle Max's face flash on the cracked screen. "Working hard as always," he exclaimed when I answered. His warm approval still caused a glow of pride to swell in my chest. "Just trying to do justice to the Irvington district," I replied, holding up my drawing to the light. "But it's getting there." "Well, make sure to take a break soon to eat," Max gently scolded. "We need to keep that brilliant artistic mind of yours fed, after all." I laughed. "I will, and thank you, Uncle Max." "You can thank me by letting me take you out tonight to celebrate properly," he insisted. "The whole family is getting together at Ambrosia, and I want to toast my world-famous niece." My smile faltered slightly. World-famous might be stretching it a bit, and honestly, I'd rather skip another tense family dinner if it's all the same to you. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I instantly regretted declining his sweet offer, but the idea of facing Aunt Clara and her scorn even now, months later, still made my stomach turn. The wounds from her resentment ran deep. Max cleared his throat gently. "Well, I understand if you're still feeling raw, but for what it's worth, Clara has been trying to make amends lately." I snorted in disbelief. "Clara doesn't do amends." "I'm serious," Max insisted. "She knows she behaved wretchedly. Don't you think she at least deserves a chance for old time's sake?" I bit my lip, considering. The genuine entreaty in his voice gave me pause. And he had a point. Holding grudges had never been in my nature. I sighed deeply. Okay, I'll be the bigger person, but I'm not promising anything more than basic civility." Max chuckled, clearly pleased. "That's all I ask. I'll swing by at 7 to get you. See you soon." I set down the phone with a reluctant smile. One tense dinner couldn't derail my newfound creative joy and confidence, and if Aunt Clara was genuinely ready to bury the hatchet, then maybe, just maybe, it was time I did too. After changing into a smart blouse and slacks, I gave my hair a final fluff in the hall mirror right as the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, sent up a quick prayer for patience, and went to greet my uncle. To my surprise, however, Aunt Clara's perfectly made-up face peered nervously at me instead when I opened the door. "Oh, good, you're home," she exhaled, clearly relieved. She smoothed her hands down her simple black sheath. "I was hoping we could talk privately before dinner." I stared wordlessly as a contrite Clara glanced at her heels. "May I come in?" The jarring ring of my cell phone shattered the quiet calm of our living room. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a knot form in my stomach. Ely, my brother-in-law. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Marla, don't play dumb with me," Eli's gruff voice barked through the speaker. "When are you going to pay me back the 60 grand you borrowed?" My eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I never borrowed any money from you." "Don't insult me with your lies," he shouted. "Nathan came to me 2 years ago begging for a loan because you two were drowning in debt. He promised he'd pay it all back once he got that big real estate deal." My heart pounded as confusion swirled in my mind. A $60,000 loan? Real estate deal? Why was this the first I was hearing about it? "Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about, but Nathan and I are certainly not drowning in debt. There must be some misunderstanding." A bitter laugh crackled through the phone. "Misunderstanding? You ungrateful." "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that." Nathan's voice startled me as he snatched the phone from my hands. I watched his face contort in anger as he paced back and forth, growling harsh whispers I couldn't make out. The veins bulged from his neck as he argued fiercely with his brother. My mind raced to make sense of Eli's wild accusations. Had Nathan really taken out a massive loan without telling me? And what debt was he talking about? As far as I knew, we were doing fine financially, a little tight with the housing market dip, but nothing unmanageable. Right? Doubt crept in as I replayed the past few months. Nathan's suspiciously long work hours, the hushed phone conversations whenever I entered a room, our dwindling savings that he always blamed on expenses. I shuddered, feeling like I didn't recognize the man I loved anymore. Nathan abruptly ended the call, his face flushed red. He ran his fingers through his hair, letting out a frustrated exhale. "What's going on, Nathan?" I asked, unable to hide the slight tremble in my voice. "Did you really take out a loan from Eli?" He avoided eye contact, his jaw tightening. "It's complicated, but you don't need to worry about it." The hell I don't, I snapped, surprising both of us with my outburst. Eli made it sound like we're drowning in debt, and you've been lying to me about money troubles. Nathan finally met my gaze, his eyes a swirling storm of conflict. Marla, you've got to trust me on this, okay? I'll handle it. I opened my mouth to protest, but he gently placed his finger on my lips, forcing a weak smile. Everything will be fine, I promise. He leaned in and kissed my forehead before grabbing his jacket and keys. Where are you going? Out, he muttered without explanation, heading for the front door. I watched helplessly as he left our home, slamming the door behind him. Doubts and suspicions swirled violently in the pit of my stomach. Who was this person I'd married, and why did I feel like I was surrounded by lies? I spent a restless night, staring at the ceiling, replaying Eli's biting words in my head. A $60,000 loan? How could Nathan have racked up that kind of debt without my knowledge? As the sun peeked through the curtains, I heard the front door creak open. Feigning sleep, I listened to Nathan's heavy footsteps and the muffled thud of his jacket hitting the floor. I rolled over, my eyes catching sight of the weary slump in his shoulders as he entered the bedroom. You're home late, I said flatly. Nathan flinched, clearly not expecting me to be awake. Yeah, had to work overtime on this new property listing. Lies. That's all I'd been hearing from him lately. My jaw clenched as I studied the dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. We need to talk about what Eli said. Marla, it's nothing, he grumbled, avoiding eye contact as he loosened his tie. My idiot brother has never been able to mind his own business. Then explain it to me, I shot back, anger bubbling up. Explain these mysterious debts and a $60,000 loan you apparently took from him behind my back. Nathan whirled around, his eyes flashing with rage. Because it's between me and him, all right? You weren't involved. We're married, Nathan, I shouted, jumping out of bed. When did you decide anything involving that kind of money wouldn't involve me? His face softened slightly as he opened his mouth to respond. But I wasn't finished. And that's not even the worst part, I seethed. The absolute worst is you lying to me this whole damn time. Nathan winced as my words struck a nerve. I haven't been lying. Oh, yeah? I stalked over to the dresser and yanked open the drawer, rifling through it until I found the bank statements. Then how about explaining these? I shoved the documents into his chest, pointing at the dwindling numbers that told a very different story than his everything is fine platitudes. Our savings account is getting drained every month, and you keep telling me it's for bills or expenses for work. My voice cracked with a mix of anger and hurt. What expenses, Nathan? The truth, for once. He stared down at the statements, his jaw clenched tightly. The strangled silence between us was deafening. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse mutter. I got in too deep. There's a big deal I've been working, but it required way more upfront cash than I had. He dragged a hand down his face warily. I took the loan from Eli to cover it, telling him I'd pay him back once I landed this property. And you couldn't tell me any of this because... I folded my arms, raising my eyebrows expectantly. Nathan sighed heavily, plopping down on the edge of the bed. You've been so focused on your career and wanting to start a family soon, I didn't want to disappoint you or add even more stress. My body went rigid as his words washed over me. More lies. Flimsy justifications for keeping me in the dark. Disappointment burned through me like acid. How had the devoted man I fell in love with become such a stranger? I fixed Nathan with a cold stare. Get out! His head snapped up, eyes widening in shock. Marla, wait, please. Get out of my house, I repeated slowly, my voice dripping with venom. I can't even look at you right now. For a beat, Nathan looked like he might protest. But something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. With slumped shoulders, he silently retrieved his jacket and walked out the door, leaving me alone with my swirling storm of rage and anguish. The deafening silence that filled our home after Nathan left was suffocating. Part of me wanted to believe his lies, to cling to the man I thought I knew. But the gut-wrenching truth hung heavy in the air. My husband had betrayed my trust in the worst way. I slouched on the couch, my head in my hands as I fought back tears. I couldn't keep living oblivious and naive while he squandered our future. It was time to take action. Grabbing my laptop, I logged into our bank accounts, my heart sinking with each new statement I pulled up. The numbers didn't lie. Huge sums were being siphoned out every month into some unknown void. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text notification from Eli. "We need to talk, face to face. I'll swing by this afternoon." I didn't bother responding, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. I spent the next few hours gathering any other evidence of Nathan's deception. Credit card statements, suspicious numbers frequently called from his phone, reports of unusual cash withdrawals from various ATMs. By the time Eli arrived, I was sitting amidst a storm of incriminating paperwork, my mind swirling with anger and disbelief. Eli barged in without knocking, his face set in stern determination. "Marla, He froze, taking in the documents scattered around me. "What is all this?" "Proof," I stated flatly, gesturing for him to sit down on the couch. "Proof that my husband has been lying to me about everything. Money has been disappearing from our accounts for months, maybe even years." As I launched into a detailed recounting of Nathan's excuses and evasions, Eli's expression morphed into seething rage. "That lying sack of shit," he growled, slamming his fist on the coffee table. "So he really took that loan from me under false pretenses?" What was his excuse? Why did he need $60,000 from you?" I demanded. Eli let out a bitter chuckle as he shook his head. "Get this. The moron claimed there was some urgent need for cash to keep your family's real estate business afloat. Spun this whole tale of hitting hard times and needing a bailout." My jaw dropped in disbelief. Our tiny, perpetually struggling real estate startup could barely afford the office rent, let alone require that kind of massive infusion of cash. "You're kidding me," I whispered, anger burning in my chest. I stood abruptly, snatching my keys off the counter. "That's it. I've had enough lying and deception." "Where are you going?" Eli asked as I stormed toward the door. "To get the truth, once and for all," I tossed over my shoulder. "And you're coming with me." Within minutes, we were speeding down the road, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. We didn't exchange any words. Eli could see the tumult of emotion roiling across my face. Finally, we arrived at a dingy pool hall on the edge of town. I'd heard rumors of high-stakes poker games taking place in the back rooms, but never imagined Nathan being involved. I shoved open the doors and marched inside, scanning the dimly lit room with narrowed eyes until I spotted a familiar frame hunched over the billiards table. Nathan. "You lying piece of shit!" I screamed, causing every head to snap in our direction. Nathan whirled around, his eyes widening in shock and fear. In that moment, I saw the man he truly was. Not the partner I devoted my life to, but a selfish coward willing to gamble away everything we'd built. I stormed toward him, Eli hot on my heels as the other patrons shrank back. "You've got some explaining to do, asshole," Eli growled, cracking his knuckles menacingly. "And you better not leave out a single goddamn detail." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply stared back at us, pale and trembling as the walls closed in. The look of sheer terror on Nathan's face should have given me some perverse satisfaction, but as I stood there, fists clenched and chest heaving, all I felt was a hollow ache of betrayal. "Well?" Eli barked, taking a threatening step forward. "You gonna explain yourself, little brother, or am I gonna have to beat it out of you?" Nathan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His gaze flickered around the hushed pool hall, seeming to realize there was no escape from this reckoning. I messed up, okay?" he stammered, holding up his hands defensively. "I got caught up in some bad business deals that put me in the hole financially." My eyes narrowed to slits. "So you lied and took $60,000 from your own brother to cover your ass, and then kept lying to me about all of it?" Something flashed in Nathan's eyes. Was it shame? Remorse? I couldn't tell, and quite frankly, I didn't care anymore. "The loan was just supposed to be temporary," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was going to pay Eli back once this big property deal went through, but things spun out of control." "Out of control?" I scoffed derisively, shaking my head in disgust. "Our bank accounts were getting drained every month from gambling debts, and whatever illegal crap you were pulling in these sleazy underground games." Nathan opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a raised hand. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the thick stack of documents I'd gathered, statements, histories, and photocopies cataloging Nathan's astounding web of deception. "This—" I shoved the papers against his chest, my voice trembling with rage. Is everything I've uncovered about your disgusting betrayal, every filthy secret, every repulsive lie you told me? With a sinking feeling, Nathan thumbed through the evidence, his face paling as the magnitude of his misdeeds was laid bare. Marla, I can explain. Save it, I spat. I'm done listening to your pathetic excuses. From the corner of my eye, I noticed the other pool hall patrons shifting uncomfortably, wanting no part of this messy confrontation. Good. I wanted them to see the lying, cheating scumbag I'd been married to. Eli stepped up beside me, cracking his knuckles ominously. So what's it gonna be, Nathan? You gonna come clean about how big of a dirtbag you've been? Panic flickered across Nathan's face as he looked between us helplessly. Please, just give me one more chance. I can fix this, I swear! Something inside me snapped at his sniveling pleas. Winding my arm back, I let loose a slap that cracked across his cheek with a resounding smack. You already had your chance, you selfish prick, I shouted, poking him hard in the chest. Now it's time to pay up for every dollar and every lie. Hot tears stung my eyes as I glared at the man I once loved, the person I naively hitched my entire future to. Eli was right. He was a lying sack of shit, not even worthy of being called family. Nathan cradled his reddened cheek, his eyes filled with a childlike fear. The air was thick with tension as we reached an impasse, the ultimatum hanging perilously. Well, Eli growled, flexing his thick arms menacingly. You gonna start talking and make things right? Or do we got a problem here? My heart pounded against my ribs as Nathan's gaze met mine, silently pleading for some shred of mercy or understanding. But there was nothing left to salvage. He was on his own now. Over the next few days, I operated in an enraged haze, making preparation after preparation for the inevitable confrontation. I invited a few of our closest mutual friends over under the pretense of a peacemaking dinner between Nathan and Eli. Little did Nathan know it was the setup for his grand unveiling as a liar and a cheat. When he arrived that evening, looking sheepish and apprehensive, I greeted him with hollow politeness. The others chatted and made small talk over drinks in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. As dinner commenced, the atmosphere thickened with tension. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Nathan's brow as he kept shooting nervous glances between Eli and me. So, our friend Mark spoke up after an uncomfortable lull. What's really going on here? We all know you two have beef. I exchanged a loaded look with Eli, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Showtime. Clearing my throat, I fixed Nathan with an icy glare. You want to know what's going on? How about we start with Nathan taking out a secret $60,000 loan from Eli? The table fell into stunned silence, all eyes swiveling to Nathan in shock. His face drained of color as he gripped his fork tightly. She's lying, he croaked out, shaking his head vehemently. I never took any loan. In one deft motion, Eli reached into his jacket and slammed a thick manila envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, scattering utensils. Really, bro? His tone dripped with disdain. Because I've got bank statements, text messages, and a whole damn paper trail showing otherwise. With trembling hands, Eli extracted the stack of documents, letting them flutter out as undeniable proof. My chest tightened as I watched the realization wash over our friends' faces, the confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror at the depths of Nathan's betrayal. No. Angela, my closest friend, whispered as she stared at the paperwork. How could you, Nathan? Your own family. His expression contorted with panic as he scanned the incriminating evidence surrounding him, the cornered prey with nowhere left to run. It's not what it looks like, I swear, he pleaded, looking around the table desperately. I was gonna pay him back, I got in over my head with this real estate deal. Cut the shit, Nathan! Eli roared, slamming his fist on the table and making everyone jump. We all know you've been blowing cash on underground gambling and God knows what else. My heart twisted as hurt flickered across Nathan's face. You told them? I told them the truth, I spat, anger reigniting. The truth about how you've been lying, stealing, and gambling away our future to fund your pathetic addiction. Something dark flickered in Nathan's eyes as his expression hardened. You're one to talk about addiction, Marla. Ever consider you're just a nagging, controlling bitch who can't handle? The crack of my palm across his cheek reverberated through the deathly silent room. A collective gasp rippled from our friends as Nathan cradled his reddened face, pure venom in his glare. "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that, you piece of garbage," Eli snarled, rising to his feet menacingly. The tangy metallic scent of blood filled the air. Whether Nathan's lip was split or from my stinging hand, I couldn't tell. All I knew was my body thrumming with adrenaline and fury as the avalanche finally crashed down. "Get out," I hissed through gritted teeth, unable to even look at Nathan anymore. "Take your shit and get out of my house." For a long, tense moment, Nathan seemed to contemplate digging in, arguing, fighting against the tide. But faced with Eli's imposing figure and our friends' disgusted stares, he had no choice but to slink away in disgrace. One by one, my friends filed out in silence, leaving just Eli and me amid the debris of shattered illusions. As I sank numbly onto the couch, the gravity of what had occurred washed over me in waves. Every duplicitous act, every egregious lie had been laid bare. And yet, rather than the catharsis or relief I expected, all I felt was a bone-deep weariness. Eli squeezed my shoulder gently as I stared off into the distance, unsure what lay ahead. But at least now, the truth was inescapable. The hours and days following that disastrous dinner blurred together in a muddled haze. Nathan made feeble attempts to reconcile, leaving pathetic voicemails and texts that I instantly deleted without listening. I was done being manipulated by his lies. My friends rallied around me, offering steadfast support and shoulders to cry on when the anguish became too much. Angela, in particular, was a rock, spending long nights on my couch as I raged, sobbed, and spilled out the depths of Nathan's deception. "I can't believe I was so blind," I whispered hoarsely one evening, clutching a glass of wine like a lifeline. How could I have not seen what a despicable person he really was? Angela squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening with compassion. "That's what con artists do, Marla. They become experts at hiding their true nature from even those closest to them." I winced at the harsh truth in her words. Con artist? It left a sour taste just thinking about Nathan that way. As the initial shock wore off, red-hot fury consumed me. The pieces were finally falling into place. His constant business trips and odd hours, the drained bank accounts and mounting debts, his panicked desperation when I uncovered the loan from Eli. It was all to cover up his spiraling gambling addiction and illicit activities. When the anger became too overwhelming to contain, Eli was my release valve. We would meet for drinks or hash it out over the phone, raging about what a pathetic, sniveling coward Nathan had become. "He's going to face consequences," Eli growled one night, slamming his fist on the bar with emphasis. "I don't care if I have to take his ass to court and garnish every paycheck. He's going to pay back every last cent with interest." My own demands went even further than just financial restitution. I wanted reparations for the emotional and psychological torture Nathan had put me through. Unbidden images would flash through my mind. Nathan sneaking out at odd hours, him huddled over a smoky poker table surrounded by seedy thugs, blowing our hard-earned money in reckless bets. The enormity of his selfish betrayal made me feel physically ill. I began compiling a case to present to my lawyer, documentation of secretive bank transfers and cash withdrawals, incriminating text messages with his gambling buddies, proof that his ludicrous business expenses were actually losses covered up. With each new discovery, my rage toward Nathan calcified like hardening cement. This was so far beyond simple indiscretions or mistakes. This was a systematic, premeditated campaign of fraud and deception against me, his wife, his supposed loved one. I wanted to ensure Nathan's lies finally caught up with him in the most publicly humiliating way possible. My ambushes continued in front of friends, family, anyone who would witness his hollow, groveling attempts to win me back. I'd calmly present the latest piece of damning evidence, watching his face go bloodless with panic. "Is this the kind of man you want to be defended?" I asked coolly during one such confrontation at Eli's house, holding up bank statements with thousands embezzled. A common criminal who stole from his own family? Nathan opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, sweat beading on his brow as our gathered loved ones stared at him in revulsion. I made mistakes. But I can change," he stammered desperately. "We can rebuild the trust. Just give me one more chance." His words trailed off as I fixed him with a look of pure, unbridled disgust. "You've had more than enough chances, Nathan. Now it's time to face the consequences of your sickening choices. With trembling hands, Eli produced a bound stack of papers, a comprehensive record of every cent Nathan owed, all the debts and losses totaled into a staggering lump sum. "This is your path to making amends," Eli stated, his voice dripping with disdain as he shoved the documents into Nathan's chest. "Either you square up and start paying, or I take you to court and legally garnish every dime to your name." An oppressive silence hung in the air, punctuated only by Nathan's shuddering breaths. His eyes darted between Eli, me, and the paperwork, the weight of the ultimatum visibly crushing him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he met my gaze with those same wounded puppy dog eyes that had melted me 1,000 times before. But not this time. "Please," he croaked out, a broken, pitiful whisper. I crossed my arms, shaking my head slowly as an adamant chill froze over my expression. "You had your chance," I said flatly. "It's over." And with that, the last withered vines of love and trust I'd clung to for far too long finally unraveled, leaving only the cold hard truth. Nathan was nothing but a selfish, pathetic liar who deserved to reap the most agonizing consequences for shredding me to pieces. With Eli's steadfast support, I launched a full-scale legal assault against Nathan. No more hollow threats or impassioned rants. It was time to hit him where it hurt most. His wallet. I filed for divorce first, seeking not only a dissolution of our sham marriage, but also compensation for the incredible emotional and financial trauma he'd inflicted. My lawyer was a ruthless barracuda who smelled blood in the water. "With the mountain of evidence you've provided, we have a very strong case against your husband for fraud, embezzlement, and gross financial malfeasance," she stated matter-of-factly as we strategized our attack. Before Nathan could so much as blink, the divorce papers were delivered along with the monetary demands, every cent of Eli's original loan, plus additional punitive damages for pain and suffering. Needless to say, Nathan didn't take it well. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" he shouted at me during one heated exchange, spittle flying. "You're trying to financially cripple me for the rest of my life." I crossed my arms, unmoved by his sputtering outrage. "I'm simply pursuing appropriate legal reparations for your egregious betrayals, Nathan. I think I'm more than entitled after you stole from me and destroyed our marriage with your lies." His face mottled red with impotent rage as my words struck a nerve. "You self-righteous bitch, like you're so innocent in all this." "I'd watch it if I were you," Eli stepped in, shoving his bony finger into Nathan's chest. "Keep running that mouth and see how much worse the financial penalties get." Nathan looked ready to swing at his older brother. "You're nothing but dead weight in your own house." Jenna's piercing words cut through the air like a dagger, striking at the core of my being. My heart pounded as I watched her face contort with rage, spewing vitriol at my husband, Ron, and me. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, but the tension had been building for weeks. Jenna, my son Derek's wife, had grown increasingly hostile and dismissive towards us. She had always been a bit of a firecracker, but her behavior had taken a drastic turn for the worse. "Why should we have to put up with this?" she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "You two are a burden, and it's time you realized it." Ron reached out to her, his gentle demeanor a stark contrast to her fury. "Jenna, please, let's not escalate this any further." But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of our once-beloved daughter-in-law. "Don't you dare try to placate me, old man." She spat. "You and your pathetic wife have worn out your welcome in this house." Derek, my son, sat in stunned silence, unable or unwilling to intervene. It was as if he didn't recognize the woman he had married. I couldn't take it anymore. "How dare you speak to us like that?" I said, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "We are your family, and we have given everything to support you and Derek." Jenna let out a derisive laugh. "Support? You call leeching off our finances and invading our privacy support? You're delusional." Her words stung like a slap in the face. Ron and I had always been hard-working, contributing significantly to the household expenses and taking care of the chores. But Jenna's manipulation had twisted the truth, making us seem like a burden rather than the loving family we had always been. I looked to Derek, hoping he would step in and defend us, but he remained silent, his head hanging low. Jenna sneered at us. "It's time for you to pack your bags and get out." This is our home, and we don't need you here anymore." As she stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of anger and confusion in her wake, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the sweet, responsible young woman we had once welcomed into our family. It was as if a dark veil had been lifted, exposing the true Jenna, cold, manipulative, and utterly devoid of compassion. Ron and I sat in stunned silence, our hearts heavy with the realization that the happy family we had cherished was nothing more than an illusion. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but one thing was certain: we would not allow Jenna's tyranny to continue unchallenged. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Jenna's outburst had created an unbearable atmosphere in our home. Ron and I treaded carefully, trying to avoid further confrontation, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would go from periods of sullen silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you, Jenna?" Derek asked one evening, his voice strained. "You've been acting so strange lately." Jenna shot him a withering glare. "Don't pretend you don't know what's going on, Derek. Your parents are the problem, not me." "But they've done nothing wrong," Derek protested. "They're just trying to help us out." "Help?" Jenna let out a harsh laugh. "They're nothing but a burden, and you're too blind to see it." Derek shook his head, his frustration evident. "I don't understand what's gotten into you. This isn't like you at all." "You're right, Derek," Jenna said, her voice dripping with contempt. "This isn't the me you thought you knew. That was just an act, and now the real me is coming out." Ron and I exchanged a worried glance. Jenna's words sent a chill down my spine. Had our entire relationship with her been a lie? The tension continued to escalate in the following days, with Jenna becoming increasingly hostile and volatile. She would deliberately ignore us or make cutting remarks, shattering the illusion of the perfect family we had once believed in. It all came to a head at a family dinner, where Jenna's behavior reached a new low. As we sat around the table, she began to berate us, her words laced with venom. "You two are nothing but leeches, sucking the life out of our family." She spat. "You're a constant drain on our resources and our happiness." "Jenna, please," Ron pleaded, his voice shaking. "We've always contributed our fair share. Why are you treating us like this?" "Because you deserve it," Jenna snarled. "You're both pathetic and weak, clinging to your son and his wife for support. It's time you learned your place." I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. This was the woman who had once professed her love and admiration for us, who had promised to be a loyal and devoted family member. But now her true colors were on display, and they were darker than we could have ever imagined. Derek tried to intervene, but Jenna shut him down with a withering glare. "Don't you dare defend them, Derek. They're not worth it." As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving us in a state of shock and disbelief, I realized that our family was in crisis. We had been blind to Jenna's true nature, and now we were paying the price. But I was determined not to let her manipulate and control us any longer. It was time to take action and reclaim our dignity. In the aftermath of Jenna's outburst, Derek seemed to be questioning everything he thought he knew about his wife. He confided in me that he was struggling to reconcile the woman he had married with the one who had been tormenting us. "Mom, I just don't understand what's going on with her," he said, his voice heavy with confusion and pain. "It's like she's a completely different person." I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I know, honey. Her behavior has been shocking, to say the least." "I need to get to the bottom of this," Derek said, a newfound determination in his eyes. "There has to be an explanation for why she's acting this way." I nodded, hoping that he would find the answers he was seeking. I had long since given up trying to make sense of Jenna's actions. A few days later, Derek approached me with a grim expression on his face. "Mom, I hired a private investigator to look into Jenna's past," he said. "What they uncovered is disturbing." My heart sank as he began to reveal the details of Jenna's history. It seemed that her manipulative behavior was nothing new. She had a pattern of latching onto wealthy families and exploiting them for her own gain. "She's been involved in multiple scams and fraud cases," Derek said, his voice shaking. "She's even been married before, to a wealthy businessman who she cleaned out before leaving him penniless." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But how could she have hidden all of this? I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. She's a master manipulator, Derek replied. She presents herself as a perfect devoted partner, but it's all an act. She's been playing me this whole time. As the full scope of Jenna's deceit became clear, Derek's face crumpled with anguish. I can't believe I let her do this to us, he said, burying his head in his hands. I should have seen it coming. This isn't your fault, Derek, I said, trying to comfort him. She fooled us all with her lies. But even as I tried to reassure him, I could see the conflict written on his face. He had invested so much in his relationship with Jenna, and the revelation of her true nature had shaken him to his core. What am I going to do, Mom? He asked, his eyes pleading with me for guidance. I can't stay with her after everything she's done, but it's still so hard to let go. I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to be strong for him. You need to make a choice, I said, my voice firm. Jenna has shown her true colors, and she's not going to change. If you stay with her, she'll continue to manipulate and exploit you, just like she's done to so many others. Derek nodded, his jaw set in determination. You're right, he said. I can't let her continue to hurt us like this. It's time to take a stand. As he left the room, I could see the resolve in his eyes. Jenna's web of lies was finally unraveling, and we were going to make her pay for the pain she had caused our family. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were united in our mission to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. In the weeks that followed, the tension in our household reached a boiling point. Jenna's hostility seemed to escalate with every passing day, as if she were determined to make our lives a living hell. It all came to a head when I suffered a minor injury while doing yard work. Nothing too serious, but it left me with a sprained ankle and limited mobility. Jenna, of course, saw this as an opportunity to further torment us. You know, with your injury, it might be better if you and Ron moved in with us for a while, she said, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. We wouldn't want you to struggle with the stairs and getting around the house. I narrowed my eyes, sensing the ulterior motive behind her offer. That's very kind of you, Jenna, but we'll manage just fine. Nonsense, she insisted, her voice dripping with false concern. It's the least we can do to help out our family. Derek, sensing my hesitation, stepped in. Mom, Jenna's right. It might be better if you and Dad stay with us for a bit until you're back on your feet. I glanced at Ron, who shrugged helplessly. We both knew that fighting Jenna's suggestion would only lead to more conflict. Fine, I conceded, trying to hide my reluctance. If you insist. Jenna's smile widened, but there was a gleam in her eye that sent a chill down my spine. Excellent. We'll get the guest room ready right away. As we settled into our temporary living arrangement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna had ulterior motives. Sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to become clear. She began to shirk all household responsibilities, leaving the cleaning, cooking, and laundry to Ron and me. Whenever we tried to protest, she would simply wave us off with a dismissive, "You're the one staying here. The least you can do is help out." Derek, caught in the middle, seemed torn between defending us and trying to keep the peace with his wife. "Jenna, this isn't right," he would say, but she would brush him off with a flippant remark. "Don't be so dramatic, Derek. They're just doing their fair share." As the weeks wore on, Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic and controlling. She would deliberately isolate us from Derek, making sure we were never alone with him for long. It was as if she were afraid we would turn him against her. "She's trying to drive a wedge between us," I confided in Ron one night as we lay in bed, exhausted from the day's emotional turmoil. Ron nodded warily. "I know. She's determined to break our family apart." As the tension continued to mount, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Jenna's manipulative tactics were pushing us to the breaking point, and I feared that soon something would have to give. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. Jenna's harassment seemed to know no bounds. As the days wore on, her tactics became increasingly brazen and cruel. "Why are you two still here?" She would sneer whenever Ron and I entered a room. "Aren't you overstaying your welcome?" Derek, to his credit, tried to intervene. "Jenna, that's enough. They're my parents, and they have every right to be here." But Jenna would simply laugh in his face. "Oh, Derek, always the dutiful son. When are you going to realize that they're using you? Ron and I would exchange helpless glances, our hearts breaking as we watched our son caught in the crossfire. Jenna's behavior grew increasingly erratic and unpredictable. She would go from periods of cold silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you?" Derek would plead, his eyes filled with anguish. "Why are you treating them like this?" "Because they deserve it," Jenna would shout, her face contorted with fury. "They're nothing but leeches, draining the life out of our family." I couldn't believe the venom spewing from her lips. This was supposed to be the woman who had promised to love and cherish our family, but now she seemed hell-bent on destroying us. The breaking point came one evening as we sat down for dinner. Jenna, as usual, had shirked all responsibility for preparing the meal, leaving it to Ron and me to cook and serve. As we all sat down at the table, Jenna looked around with a sneer. "What's this? You two couldn't even be bothered to set the table properly?" I bristled at her accusation. "We did our best, Jenna. If you have a problem with it, maybe you should have helped out." Jenna's eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home?" she snarled. "You ungrateful old hag." Before I could respond, Jenna slammed her hands on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. "That's it. I've had enough of you two dragging us down. It's time for you to pack your bags and get out." Derek jumped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Jenna, stop this. They're not going anywhere." But Jenna ignored him, her eyes boring into me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "You have 24 hours to gather your things and leave," she said, her voice low and menacing. "If you're not out by then, I'll have the police remove you." Tears stung my eyes as I watched Derek wrestle with his emotions, torn between defending us and trying to reason with his wife. As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I knew that the time for passivity was over. We had tried to reason with her, to appeal to her better nature, but all our efforts had been in vain. Ron and I exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between us. We had endured enough. It was time to take a stand and reclaim our dignity. "Pack your bags," I said to Ron, my voice steely with determination. "We're leaving this house and we're not going quietly." From that moment on, there was no turning back. We were going to fight fire with fire, and Jenna was about to face the consequences of her actions. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of anger and determination. Ron and I wasted no time in packing our belongings, our hands trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I can't believe she's doing this to us," Ron said, his voice thick with emotion as he folded his clothes into a suitcase. "After everything we've done for her." I shook my head, my jaw clenched. "She's shown her true colors, Ron. We can't let her continue to walk all over us like this." As we packed, we could hear the sound of raised voices coming from the living room. Derek and Jenna were engaged in a heated argument, their words punctuated by the occasional crash of something being thrown or knocked over. "Can't believe you're kicking them out." Derek's voice rang out, laced with disbelief and anger. "They're your family too, Jenna." "They're dead weight, Derek," Jenna shouted back. "They've been holding us back for far too long. It's time we cut them loose." I winced at her words, my heart aching for my son. He was caught in the middle of a war he never asked for, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his parents. As we finished packing our last few belongings, Derek appeared in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with anguish. "I tried to talk her out of this, but she won't listen to reason." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. "It's not your fault, honey. Jenna's made her choice, and we have to respect that." Derek shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know who she is anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "The woman I married has become a stranger to me." As we headed towards the front door, our bags in hand, Jenna appeared, a triumphant sneer plastered on her face. "Well, look who's finally leaving," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's about time you two learned your place." I bristled at her words, my anger rising like a tidal wave. "You're a twisted, manipulative woman, Jenna," I spat, "and you're going to regret the day you turned on this family." Jenna simply laughed, unfazed by my words. "Empty threats, as always. You two have no power here. This is my house, and I decide who stays and who goes." As she spoke, I caught a glimpse of Derek standing behind her, his face twisted into a mask of anguish and conflict. It was as if he were watching the slow destruction of everything he had believed in, powerless to stop it. With one final glare at Jenna, Ron and I turned and walked out the door, our heads held high. We had been forced out of our own home, but we refused to let her see our pain. As we loaded our bags into the car and prepared to drive away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality wash over me. Our ties to Jenna had been severed, perhaps for good. But in that moment, I knew that we had made the right choice. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be victimized any longer. As we pulled away from the house, leaving our old life behind, I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of Derek standing in the doorway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. It was a painful sight, but it only strengthened my resolve. We were free of Jenna's tyranny, and now it was time to focus on the next chapter of our lives. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were determined to make her pay for the pain she had inflicted on our family. The days following our departure from the house were filled with a tense silence. Ron and I had found temporary refuge in a modest apartment, but the weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air. Derek had remained distant, no doubt struggling to come to terms with the fracturing of his marriage. I longed to reach out to him, to offer comfort and support, but I knew he needed time to process everything on his own terms. It wasn't until a week later that he finally came to see us, his face etched with anguish and determination. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said as we ushered him into the small living room. "Of course, honey," I replied, my heart aching at the sight of his pain. "What's on your mind?" Derek took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice steady. "I'm leaving Jenna." Ron and I exchanged a glance, equal parts surprised and relieved. "Are you sure about this, son?" Ron asked, placing a comforting hand on Derek's shoulder. Derek nodded, his jaw set. "It's the only choice I have left. Her behavior has become too much to bear, and I can't continue living with someone who treats my family with such cruelty and disrespect." As he spoke, the full weight of his decision seemed to hit him, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I thought I knew her," he said, his voice breaking. "But the woman I married is gone, replaced by someone cold and heartless." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back my own emotions. "I'm so sorry, Derek," I said, my voice thick with sorrow. "No one should have to go through what you're experiencing." Derek pulled back, his face hardening with resolve. "It's not just her treatment of you and Dad," he continued. "She's been unfaithful, and I've found evidence of her involvement in financial fraud and other illegal activities." I couldn't help but gasp at the revelation. "Jenna's been cheating and breaking the law?" I asked, my heart sinking. Derek nodded grimly. "It seems her manipulative behavior has been a pattern throughout her life. She's been using me, just like she used her previous husband before me." As the full scope of Jenna's deception became clear, a wave of anger washed over me. She had not only tormented our family, but had also betrayed Derek's trust in the worst possible way. "That's it," I said, my voice steely with determination. "She's gone too far this time. We can't let her get away with this." Derek looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "You're right, Mom. It's time we fought back and held her accountable for her actions." As we sat together, discussing our next steps and strategizing our approach, I could sense a shift in the air. Derek had finally awakened to the truth about Jenna, and he was no longer willing to be a passive victim in her web of lies and deceit. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. Jenna's reign of terror over our family was coming to an end, and she was about to face the consequences of her actions. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared to confront Jenna and reclaim our belongings from the house. Derek had enlisted the help of his uncle, a former law enforcement officer, to accompany us and ensure a peaceful resolution. As we pulled up to the familiar driveway, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. This was it, the final showdown with the woman who had wreaked so much havoc on our family. "Remember, stay calm and don't engage with her unless absolutely necessary," Derek's uncle Tom instructed us. "We're just here to retrieve your belongings and leave. Any confrontation should be avoided." Ron and I nodded, our jaws set with determination. We had come too far to let Jenna's mind games derail us now. As we approached the front door, it swung open and Jenna appeared, her face contorted into a sneer. Well, if it isn't the prodigal family returning," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Derek stepped forward, his shoulders squared. "We're not here to cause trouble, Jenna," he said, his voice steady. "We've come to collect our belongings and leave, that's all." Jenna's eyes narrowed as she took in the presence of Tom. "Who's this, then? Your muscle to try and intimidate me?" She let out a harsh laugh. "Don't bother. You're not scaring anyone." Tom remained impassive, his years of training evident in his calm demeanor. "Ma'am, we're not here to cause any problems. We just want to retrieve the belongings and be on our way." Jenna's eyes flashed with rage as she turned to Derek. "You really think you can just waltz back in here and take whatever you want?" she snarled. "This is my house, and you have no right to anything in it." Derek held up a hand, his face hardening. "That's enough, Jenna. You know full well that many of those belongings are my parents' property. We're not leaving until we get them back." For a moment, it seemed like Jenna might escalate the situation further, her body tensed like a coiled spring. But as she took in the determined expressions on our faces and the presence of Tom, her resolve seemed to falter. "Fine," she spat, stepping aside. "Take your trash and get out of my sight." As we entered the house and began retrieving our belongings, Jenna paced around us like a caged animal, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won, don't you?" she sneered, her voice trembling with anger. "Well, this isn't over. You'll pay for this, all of you." Derek paused in his task, turning to face her. "Enough, Jenna. We're not here to fight with you. Just let us take our things and leave in peace." Jenna's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Peace? You want peace after everything you've done to me?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You're all pathetic. You'll regret this, mark my words." As we loaded the last of our belongings into the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The battle was won, and Jenna's reign of terror had finally come to an end. As we drove away, leaving Jenna's angry shouts behind us, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the porch, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. In that moment, she looked small and powerless, her threats ringing hollow. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be bullied any longer. Jenna's downfall was complete, and she was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and the emotional turmoil of Derek's divorce. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and rebuild our lives, free from the tyranny that had once threatened to destroy us. As we drove into the sunset, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and determination. We had faced adversity head-on and emerged victorious, and now it was time to move forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before.